Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think we'll get started here tonight. So welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Council of the Municipality of Thames Centre. Today is Monday, July 15th, 2024. We are meeting here in the Municipal Office Commercial Chambers at 4305 Hamilton Road in the Village of Dorchester. And the time is 5 p.m. and I'd like to call the meeting to order. Item number 2 on your agenda is the actual approval of the agenda. We do not have any additions to the agenda. However, I've been advised just a short time ago that item number 7.2 on the agenda has been pulled by the applicant, and we'll deal with it at another time. So a mover and a seconder to accept the agenda as amended. Deputy Mayor Smyber and the seconder, Councilor Lucky, all in favor? Great, that motion carries. This time I'd like to ask Council if there is any disclosure of pecuniary interest and the nature thereof. None? Okay, just one announcement tonight. We've been advised due to the fact that they're still waiting for agility equipment to be delivered. The Thorndale Dog Park opening, which was supposed to be held on the 17th, July 17th, is going to have to be postponed till a later date once that equipment comes in. The first item on the agenda is the Senior of the Year Award presentation. So I'd like to call Karen first to come up.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Karen Gress. I'm the coordinator at the Senior Center in Dorchester. I'd like to call Willie Royackers up here. She's our Senior of the Year. Willie has been a dedicated volunteer for close to 30 years. She helps every month at the Hot Meals, which are a big fundraiser for the Senior Center. And she also volunteers at the bazaar and the garage sale each year, and she does things to help out. And I know this is very embarrassing for her. She doesn't like any attention. She likes to do the behind the scenes things, but we feel that she really deserves kudos for all of the hard work that she does and for helping support the Senior Center and for being a good friend.
Much for all the work that you do. Oh, I guess it's you got some fireworks. Yeah, she'll pull it out. There you go. Thank you. So I'm going to hold it. Thank you. Okay, quick. Oh gosh, holding things up. 1, 2, 3. Hold the smiles. My angle ends. 1, 2, 3. Up both here. Beautiful. Thank you. Okay, Amanda, whenever you're ready, go ahead. Second. Okay, it's fine.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. So the purpose and effect of this application is to rezone the subject property from the agricultural A zone to a site-specific agricultural A-sign zone to add doggy daycare, retail store, and personal service establishment as additional permitted uses on the property. And the effect would be to legalize and permit the establishment of the use on the lands. So the subject property is located on the east side of Fairview Road, north of Dundas Street and north of the CP Railway. And the surrounding uses are predominantly agricultural in nature, although there are nearby residential uses to the north and south of the property. This property was previously used as a kennel in the past, which may have been considered a legal non-conforming or grandfathered use. However, the use has since ceased and would not meet today's zoning requirements for a kennel due to the required 180-meter setback from the closest neighboring dwelling. The applicant advised the kennels have since been removed. The applicants are seeking to legitimize the existing business on the property, which offers daycare services for dogs, including the training of dogs. The applicant is proposing grooming services, which would fall under the personal service establishment definition in the zoning bylaw, and proposing a retail store to sell dog treats, food, leashes, and t-shirts. As part of the doggy daycare use, the application would permit the installation of a dog dining pool and a dog waiting pool. The doggy daycare use would also involve a private dog park, 4 booking areas, and a patio serving refreshments for clients. A new definition for doggy daycare is being proposed for the site-specific zone and has been included in the report. The business operates from 7 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Monday to Friday with occasional appointments on weekends and has 7 part-time and full-time employees. The business averages approximately 34 dogs per day with a maximum capacity of 40 dogs. So the proposed accessory building to be used for the doggy daycare is located approximately 77 meters from the neighboring dwelling to the north and approximately 106 meters from the neighboring dwelling to the south. The outdoor areas for dogs are proposed to be located approximately 16 meters from the neighboring dwelling to the north and 63 meters from the neighboring dwelling to the south. The applicants have advised noise mitigation measures have been implemented, including fire rate drywall, sound transmission class rated doors, and a privacy screen at the dog daycare play area. Counter conditioning dog training is practiced to stop dogs from barking. Additionally, there are cedar trees and bushes between the daycare area and the neighboring property. The application submission indicates although the doggy daycare use will not be a kennel, it will be similar in nature to a kennel. However, dogs will not be locked in kennels and will be supervised. So the provincial policy statement, County of Middlesex official plan, and Thames Center official plan generally permit agricultural related uses in agricultural areas subject to criteria. The Thames Center official plan also states the development of agricultural related commercial and industrial uses shall be subject to site plan control. Thames Center's official plan also contains criteria used to evaluate zoning bylaw amendments. Most of the criteria is capable of being satisfied. However, staff have concerns regarding the anticipated adverse effects from the proposed doggy daycare on neighboring residential uses, given the proximity of the use to neighboring residential uses. Although the applicants are proposing a doggy daycare and have implemented noise mitigation measures, staff have not been provided with a noise assessment completed by a qualified acoustical engineer to demonstrate no negative impacts would occur. Thames Center zoning bylaw permits kennels in agricultural areas provided the kennel meets setback requirements, including that the kennel is at least 180 meters from a dwelling located on a separate lot. This regulation is in place to ensure compatibility with neighboring uses. Although the application indicates the proposed use is not a kennel, staff is of the opinion the proposed use would involve keeping up to 40 dogs on the property during the day would have the same impact as a kennel. The applicant's proposal to include the uses, the retail uses and personal service establishment could have impacts to adjacent lands. Without potentially limiting the definition of these uses, any retail store or personal service establishment would be able to be located on the site if zoning permission exists. Should council consider approval of such uses, they're advised to take into consideration scoping the uses to only apply to those requested by the applicant, being a retail store devoted to the sale of dog-related products, and a personal service establishment limited to grooming and dog training. Staff would like to note that permitted uses stay with the property regardless of ownership. In regards to agency comments, no concerns or objections were indicated by the county engineer, Director of Public Works, Drainage Superintendent, or the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority. The chief building official advised the proponent shall be advised that building permits shall be required for any alterations to existing buildings to accommodate the new proposed uses and for any new proposed buildings having an area greater than 10 square meters. The proponent should also be advised that any pools capable of holding a depth of water of 24 inches or greater shall be enclosed by a fence meeting the requirements of the Thames Center fence bylaw. In regards to public comments, Susan Toth and Kim White provided comments, and these comments have been appended to the report. Given the foregoing, staff recommend that the application for zoning bylaw amendment be refused for the reasons outlined in the report. Should council wish to approve the application, information has been included in the report for council's consideration, including an alternate resolution. The bylaw and alternate resolution, as included in the report, speak to the requirement for site plan control, which assists with site development matters, ensuring that they're built, installed, and maintained. Municipal staff are consulted regarding proposed definition. And should council wish to approve the amendment, the animal control bylaw will also need to be updated to add doggy daycare licenses, provisions similar to kennel licensing. Thank you. I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Amanda. Does the applicant or the agent have any additional information that you'd like to provide? Do you want to just say to you, please?
Yeah, thank you, Your members of council. My name is Stuart Finlater, and I'm the planning consultant, and being retained by Roy in regards to this application. So, Mr. Roy, I'd like to say a few words and just a little bit of a summary of his business proposal and the planning aspect of this.
Certainly, go ahead. Again, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Good evening, I'm Max McCoy, I'm the president of the Clerk Incorporated. Thank you, Your Worship, and the chance to let me speak today. Appreciate it. I just very brief background that me and my wife built this company up from the ground for the past 4 years. There are lots of years of life savings into our business, and everything we did is coming from a training point of view. As we originally were trainers to begin with, and due to COVID and uprising of under socialized dogs, due to overwhelming demand, that we decided to switch to training and daycare at the same time. So we purchased the property in September of last year, and we had a vision and design in place long before we even purchased this property, due to the demand of local surrounding areas. In relation to kind of measures that we've implemented to make sure that we are positive experience in the community, like I mentioned before, we have fire-rated walls, we have resonating channels and safe insulation. The biggest part being condition to dogs barking. We've been very proactive with our neighbours. We have checked in with them to make sure that we are being good neighbours, and that if there's any issues come forward, we let us know so we can address them. We're very conscious of noise, especially considering dogs are not trained and naturally go to barking. So personally, I'm allergic to barking, so it's a big demoralizer for staff as well. So there is a massive difference between our facility and a kennel. I reject any notion that we're in any way, shape, or form comparable to a kennel. The nature of the kennel is unsupervised, segregated areas to keep dogs overnight. So we're not in any way related to a kennel. You knew me and Lauren, looked at the website. We don't want any affiliation. It's just a completely separate market. We don't believe. We do believe this outdated form of dog care. I understand that other businesses do it, and there's always going to be demand for that, but it's just not something we would like to get part of through either morals or just through training ethics. It's just not something that we want to be affiliated with. And lastly, to touch up, I'd like to mention that we have been proactive with our neighbours, And some of our neighbours have come forward to let us know about a recent incident of another dog company visiting them in homes to persuade them and fearmonger them with the property value of the down in pricing, and that we plan on opening a kennel in secret or through a stepping stone. Among other allegations, which obviously this individual knows nothing about. So just wanted to inform you there is some underhand practice going on, and I will know about it unless good neighbours came forward to notify me. Thank you so much for speaking, and thank you to everyone for listening.
Thank you. Stuart, whenever you're ready.
Yes. As Max has told council, this is not a kennel in any way, shape, or form. It's a daycare and training facility. I've been there probably a dozen times since I've been retained by Max and Lawrence. And I've had dogs, I've been at kennels, have their purpose obviously, but this is not a kennel, and there is very, very limited barking, if at all, when the dogs are inside. I've seen them on the outside. Max has cameras on the outside of that facility that records everything 24/7, including with volume. And if you look at any day for the last 6 months, you will see what kind of noise comes from the dogs that are on that ground, and it's very, very limited. So just wanted to make that point to start with. The report that planner has done for the township, I've reviewed that. Clearly, it looks, that's the only concern that staff have raised is the possibility of noise from the animals. And Max has addressed that. That's exactly what they try and do with the dogs that are on this property, is train them, socialize them so they don't bark. Somebody comes in, the dog is. So I think the noise aspect is highly overplayed in this report. I mean, there's a CN rail line 100 meters south of this property with trains that go by 7 or 8 times a day and load the train horns. The airport's not far away. I would do not, a lot of noise. There's a car repair shop immediately to the north of this property. So there's a lot of already what I would say would be ambient noise in the area. I don't believe that this particular operation is going to add that or make it worse than what's already there. As far as the quickly just run through the planning rationale for why I believe this should be approved in terms of the PPS. There's nothing in the PPS that would prohibit a business such as this. There's sections in the PPS that talk about needing to promote economic development, economic activity, business activity in rural areas to keep the rural areas thriving. That's what this does. This business hires, employs 6 or 7 people. Max and Heather also work in it, and they live there. They live on the property, so they don't want to face some problems. Upsetting. As the board said, the county official plan and the Thames Center official plan both allow commercial related uses, and what's one of them. You know, we've said it's not a kennel, but there are dogs there, so in our opinion, it's similar to that, and the official plans should not be an issue as far as any information about this to take place. So in the only conclusion, we've applied for a rezoning to allow a dog daycare. And we have met with staff on a number of locations inside of either thing. I think we've come up with a fairly decent definition. We've also talked to staff about, as was in the report, about coming up with a similar to a kennel licensing bylaw, a dog daycare licensing bylaw through the municipal act. So I think with all those things in place, I think that this business can operate at this location with very limited impact on any of the surrounding neighbors. And I these answer any questions that Max jump in. questions that.
Thanks, Mr. Finlater. So at this time, are there any questions from anyone in the council chambers or comments? If you have some, would you like to come forward to the podium, please, and just state your name?
My name is Larry Zamet. I'm next door to the property we're talking about here. We're only about, I don't know, 70 meters away from I'm talking about my premises, my home, the home itself, the house itself. Actually, I can hear two people talking at a regular voice from my home, from my bedroom, right? So that's how close I am to this property. Now, I'd like to start first that I got no complaints whatsoever if these people want to have I have no objection for if they're gonna have dog training, daycare, dog grooming, shop. That's okay with me as long as it's during the day, naturally, which I'm assuming that they will during the day. So I have no complaint whatsoever if they have one of business where they have regular dog training and all that kind of stuff. Now, the premises where they are, there is a dog kennel license, okay? Which was issued about almost 30 years ago, right? Without the neighbors ever, the township issued this permit for the kennels. Without the neighbors ever, none of the neighbors ever been told, just issue the permit for a kennel. And as I said, we're so close that, but anyway, that's 30 years ago. So now this, another thing that I want to bring out. So now I will very much against to help these people get started or whatever with their business. But I want two issues if it can be done. One is to the permit, the kennel permit. I mean, the kennel, just the kennel permit, be omitted, will be taken off. If that's possible, I think. All right. The other issue I have is on the weekends. Is this gonna be a every weekend dog show, dog circus, or whatever and there is only about, I would say about 12 car parking space. So I'm assuming if you have a dog show, you're gonna have 50 cars. So where they gonna be? They're gonna be on the road. But anyway, that's an issue that you guys have to keep that in mind, not me. And if it's gonna be every weekend or what, I don't know. Now, did anybody from the township ever visited the location? They did? Okay. And I guess that's pretty well my thing is, but is this gonna be written down? Because I'm assuming they spent about $50,000 already on the premises without even a permit. So once we got the permit, is this gonna grow more and more and more? I don't know. This is something you guys have to look into. And I don't, what I'm trying to say is, you guys gotta do your job, that if okay, they're giving it the permit for dog training and all, that's okay, that's fine. But it's gonna stop at that point, it's not gonna just keep growing. That's my point. I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Are you looking to reply?
Thank you, Your Worship. If I may answer some questions. Thank you, Larry. Those are really great questions. So to answer about the kind of dog circus or dog shows, or even, I think what Larry means is events, for the property. We do plan on having about 2 or 3 events a year. At the most, it's a very hard exercise, but it's not a massive property to have those kind of events. And I rightfully say parking is somewhat limited. We have about 22 car spaces at the moment. So luckily we formed a good relationship with other neighbours that we did have an event, and it's allowing higher capacity, then we apply for permits where necessary, and allow with neighbours' permission to use their property to park. But without the necessary car spaces, of course, we're not going to have events that are going to overfill capacity and be a nuisance on the road. That's a big no-show, but we've proactive about that and built a car park from the moment we moved in. So there's never been cars on the road. In relation to permits, well, each permit and each evolution is assessed on its own merits. From what's in the application here, we have no intention, no plan to evolve in any way, shape, or form more than it already is. The only permit that we've got pending, which got approved today, is just for inside a gazebo. It's relatively small. It's just for a bit of shade. The only other permit we'll most likely apply for is just a fencing permit for our dog diving pool. I think I answered all the questions in relation to that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Is there anyone else who wishes to comment or ask a question? The same thing applies. If you'd like to come up and state your name.
My name is Kelly. Do you need last names as well? Sure. Okay, so my name is Kelly Verport. I live just down the road, and I did see the construction going on and the building. And I ride my bike quite frequently with my son. We'll ride by. It's beautiful properties down there. I didn't even know Doggo Den was open. I didn't even know they were open for business. In fact, quiet. So I didn't know there were dogs on the premise. And I was shocked to find out they've been doing all their things with such quiet. And it was amazing to me that they have been working with and training dogs for months and months and months. And there's been absolutely no noise at all. Nothing. And I drive by with my bike and the dogs, they'll see people bragging by with their bikes and there's no barking. I just wanted to say, I thoroughly promote and stand behind my neighbor, and I'm not concerned at all about this zoning.
Thank you for your comments. Was there someone else at the back who would like to?
Okay, council. My name is Kyle Lenka. I am an attorney. And my mother, Valerie Biggs, has been a client of Doggo Den for about a year now. Maybe it's 2 years. And then she's getting a little older, so I assist with her dropping off and picking up Trevor. So I'm there early in the mornings and in the evenings, so a couple times a week. And I just wanted to say, as for my own behalf, I've never heard of Doggo. It's quiet, it's well taken care of. It's as proxy for my mother capacity. She really has support initiatives.
Thank you for your comment. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. My name's Fran Ender. I have 2 roles. I'm a client, and but we have the most nut bar dog on the planet. And the miracles that Max and Lori, the skills they've instilled in me, as well as my dog, have been unbelievable. And I go twice a week and pass the dogs that are outside, and if there's one little bark, the staff are there right away. Like, I've never been to a place that's been so quiet, and the dogs are so well behaved. I've been to kennels, and it's just massive barking because they're in kennels until they get their playtime, and that's not the case here. it's amazing. My other hat is that I'm the Ontario Coordinator for Airedale Rescue for the province. And I've had some cases, one particular dog that's going to be in very big trouble with its life. And Max took the time to have the adopted family come out, spend time, and turn that dog right around. So unlike any other place I've been, it's skill-based dog daycare, and the dogs learn the entire time for them. It's an amazing facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Yes, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. My name is Khalid Mahmood, and I live on Dundas and Field Corner. And I go where I'll be walking down the road, past their property. And we pass right by the fence, me and sometimes my grandkids. I've never heard of dog barking. They come up to the fence and wave at you. Sometimes kids want to go pet them, but I said, no, don't do it. We don't go there. Sometimes if they're out, then I go in myself, and then I go talk to them, dogs are running around. I've never heard them talking. And I think it's a welcome addition to our road there, good business, young people. I'm all for it, so if you guys can help them out, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else?
Hi there, my name is Stephanie Williams. I'm a resident of Thorndale. I'm here in support of Max and Lori and Doggo 10. We have 2 dogs, and one of them was one of those COVID dogs that Max spoke about. Lots of behavioral issues that we really struggled with. And within, I think, 1 minute of us being at Doggo Den, they taught me more than the dog, I think, how to respond to his challenges. I drop off my dog about once a week. And I absolutely have had nothing but positive experiences. The dogs are all very happy when they're there. They're playing. There's never any barking. I think having that open concept where all of the dogs can play and they've never had any incidents in 4 years with the dogs really speaks to the attention that Max and Lori paid to the dogs. So very proud to have you as part of our community, and I hope that you approve.
Thank you. Did I see one other hand? Yes, go forward there whenever you're ready.
My name is Adriana Goodmanson. I'm a client of Doggo Den. I've had dogs all of my life and usually more than one at a time. In this December of last year, I adopted the most difficult dog I've ever had. It's a 120-pound big dog, lots of energy, lots of behavioral issues. I have, and his name is Lenny. He is at Doggo Den 5 days a week. The change in him is just remarkable. The socialization, the skills, and not just for the dog, but also for me as an owner. The experience has been second to none. I've never experienced something like it in my life. And it's incredible that you go there and there could be 15 dogs in a room in an area, and they're all just self-settling. They're all just quiet. They're all just hanging out. It's remarkable. I've had, and I understand the issues around noise. There just isn't any, because they teach the dogs to self-settle themselves. And so I'm there 5 days a week. I've never heard that any of the dogs create any kind of incessant barking. And it's quite common that if one dog barks right then the next, and then you get a frenzy. I've never seen that happen there. The care as well. My dog had got injured and he has been in surgery for about 4 weeks ago. Max and Lori took exceptional time out to help me to train him to swim so that his rehabilitation could be better. So the nature of the service is just second to none. It's not like something that you would get at any kind of kennel. And I just have nothing but great things to say about them as owners and as both caregivers to the dogs and trainers, not just to the dogs, but as us as owners of dogs. And I really hope that you will approve the application.
Thank you. We have one more person.
My name is Laura Wary from Beach. A few things just to point out to you, everyone. First is my dog George is a dash down, so he's going crazy. he's been going to Doggo Den pretty much since their inception. And he does not work, doesn't work at home, doesn't work at daycare. And that's something that they have trained to do. I certainly didn't train them. When they started, they were in a house, they were just watching dogs in their own home. They lived in Masonville area in London. You would go to pick up the dogs. They had a neighbor dog that would bark incessantly, nonstop, and their yard would be full of dogs and not a single one barking. So I think the noise issue, and as everybody has said, is no, like, I think that can be taken off the table. Couple other things, they are huge investors in this community. They are title sponsor of Dorchester Pet Fest. They have been actively asking for volunteers from their daycare community to help out at Dorchester Pet Fest. They also sponsored, not right in this area, but they also sponsored Woodstock Wiener Fest. And again, we're actively getting volunteers from their business and their daycare community to go out and help. And I also think, I mean, we don't think of dog daycares as like, you know, different on a different level as child daycares, but at the end of the day, people want daycare for their dog like they want for their child. And when people are looking to move into an area, they want a daycare that they can bring their dog to just as much as they want a daycare they can bring their child to. And I think if that, you know, we're all looking for growth in the community, you need a business like this in that community to help you. So please, for the sake of my dog, push forward with the application. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
So, good afternoon, your worship and councillors. Thank you for allowing time on your agenda today. So first of all, as an author, I want to be clear.
Excuse me, just one more. Could you give us your name?
Sure, yeah.
Daryl, your last name?
Yeah, Morse. So first of all, I want to be clear, and as an entrepreneur myself, I would never try to stop anyone from starting a business. As far as I'm concerned, it's a risk and it's good on them. So I did own a dog boarding and daycare for 15 years. I no longer do, but before I purchased my land in 2006, I had to go through all the paperwork. You know, I had, which included a minor variance, due to the proximity of my proposed kennel to the neighboring properties. I also had to apply for the proper permits before breaking ground in the spring of 2007. It wasn't easy, and it took a lot of time and effort just to make sure that everything was in place. This is a process I respect and appreciate it. The laws and bylaws are there for a reason. I've come here to express concerns about the zoning change on the Fairview Road. There are many factors that need to be addressed about possible issues, and I'm almost positive they will arrive. A dog boarding facility offers social play outside from the hours from roughly around 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Some kennels might go to 7. Daycare offers the exact same thing. Dogs will bark, especially during social play. When they get excited, they're talking to a playmate, just the way that we communicate with each other in humans. We all see this every day on the streets, at a dog park, and even in your own backyard. The only difference between a boarding kennel, or between boarding and daycare, is that boarding dogs are staying for extended periods of time. However, the daycare hours consist of the same thing a daycare would, right? Boarding dogs are usually let out between, for about 5 or 15 minutes for a potty break around, 8 or 9 p.m. Other than that potty break, they are inside from 6 to 7 p.m. You won't hear them bark during the night because they're inside and they're tired from physical activity. So the applicant wants to change zoning from A to A hashtag. A number sign has been attached to zoning because they're in the TCOP. I believe there's no classification for such zoning or doggy daycare. I would like some clarification what that number sign means from the council or Thames Center staff after my floor time is expired here. The other main concern I have is the distance between dwellings. Are you aware of the laws of the distance? It's supposed to be 180 meters, as stated in the bylaw. So years ago, this municipality received at least 2 complaints
about the noise coming from the former kennels I used to operate. One was from my closest neighbor. Demanding Thames Center install and pay a sound barrier wall behind his house like they have on the 401, and he is 150 meters away. I actually have a complaint that copy if anybody from the Thames Center would like to see that. The second was a petition from the neighbors, some of which were more than 400 meters away, complaining about the noise. This was instigated by the closest neighbor who wanted the wall. The former planner that actually used to work for Thames Center emailed me and asked me if I could limit the dogs being outside to reduce the noise. So if council here approves the zoning change on Fairview, what's to stop doggy daycares from popping up anywhere in a zone A? My question is, what makes doggy daycare different than any other boarding account? Why shouldn't they follow the exact same rules as what a kennel would be? There are other businesses like rover.com and similar websites where anyone, even in this town, are boarding other people's pets in quantities of 3 or more, and there's no one there to police that. Will something like this be allowed to happen here in Thames Center? As I stated before, and I want to be perfectly clear, I'm not against this business starting up and operating in my neighborhood. I just want to make sure that the TCOP rules are followed and the same rules are applied to every kennel and so on and so forth in past. So again, thank you for your worship and Councilor Street.
Thank you. Anyone else have any?
My name is Loretta Smith. I'm a former counselor, so I understand how things go on in council as well as how the planning department works as well. When the former speaker spoke about neighborhood, well, there's neighborhood and then there's neighborhood. We live across the road. So I'm in the neighborhood, really in the neighborhood of Dogwood Den. And I don't just speak for myself and my husband, Larry. I also speak to my father-in-law, who is the property right next door in the closest proximity. And he's given me permission to say he's not opposed to this at all. And it was my brother-in-law that owned the former kennel that was there. I can tell you honestly, there was more noise coming from Terry and Sharon's Church kennels than there ever has been with Dogwood Den. But the noise is not necessarily the big issue that council is looking at. The big issue that council is looking at, I believe today, is the zoning bylaws, correct? Okay, so it's my understanding that all of you on council ran on the promise of economic development. And economic development comes with innovation attached. Like they run part and parcel. You want to do real economic development, then you have to look at things that are innovative. And if nothing else, then Dogwood Den has actually provided a paradigm shift. It's an innovation on how to care for dogs. And perhaps people who run kennels and who are concerned about the rules and the regulations are more concerned about they didn't think about this first than actually what this is doing. This is a paradigm shift that I think should be welcomed and really should be welcomed by a council who has run on innovation and economic development. They're sound. They are in a proper place, like it's in an agricultural zone. There's minimal neighbors. There's not the dogs barking. They're very quiet. And I just think that it becomes one of those things that either you really truly believe what you said when you campaigned about economic development and you truly understand what innovation is, or was that just lip service and you're now on council? And I don't believe that any one of you provided us with lip service. I really do truly want to believe that you actually believe in innovation and you believe in economic development and will allow this to go through. I understand from the planning department that they have rules that they have to follow, But I also am aware that there are other municipalities that have daycare centers for dogs. So there's a step for you to be able to follow, and my understanding is that the planning department and the CAO, and perhaps even the council, even has the rules and regulations about dog daycare centers. So wouldn't it be wonderful if this township, instead of being known as the Department of No, like of the Township of No, which you have a solid reputation of being, and being the council that took that step forward and it said, wow, we did that first. Isn't that nice? Good on you. So I am in favor. I don't just speak for my father-in-law who's next door. I also speak to Floyd Wills and Gabriel Wills, who owns the property in between our farm and the railroad tracks, which is within that zoning area. And I speak for my brother Bruno Busquero, who owns the farm that is right next to the railroad tracks, like just in between where Linda's property is and the railroad tracks. So I speak for a number of people. And I'm encouraging you, if you really truly did one on economic development, you say yes, and you make it happen. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you for. My name is Linda Reed. I'm one of the last neighbors that hasn't spoken yet. I have no opposition to Max and Lori. I have not heard a dog, and I'm outside a lot. I can hear the cattle that are not really on our road, but back almost to Heritage, not quite. They make more noise than that doggo den. So, as I said, I welcome them to my neighborhood, and I hope people will in favor of this business.
Thank you for your comments. One other person back there.
Hi there, my name is Brianna Sadler. Like Laura, I have a dachshund, notorious for barking. We are still working on some things with Layla, but she is silent on site. And I cannot tell you what a difference I see between my dog at home, where obviously we expect some slightly more territorial behaviors, and the difference when she is on site with Max and Lori. She's quiet, she is far more reserved, and she understands that there are boundaries there and she does not cross them. She absolutely adores Lori. Sometimes I think maybe a little bit more than she loves me. It's really hurts. But yes, she is an entirely different dog when she's on there. There are clear rules in place for the dogs that prevent issues, that prevent things like barking, things like fights breaking out between the dogs. And I've never seen the dog disrespect those rules, and certainly I've never seen my dog. And she's so different when she's there with me. I think the work they're doing is incredible. I don't trust anyone with my dog the way that I trust Max and Lori. I am a childless millennial. Layla is my life, and I would trust her life with them. They're doing it forward. Really supportive.
And thank you for your comments. Is there someone online here?
Like I said, my name is Emmett, I live next door, explained before, to the premises. I just, don't know, hopefully I'm not misunderstood. As I said before, repeat it again, that I have no issue for the place to be, as a dog training place and that kind of stuff. That's no issue with me, and I gotta agree with these people that very little party if I heard any. Right, so I agree with all these people what they said about that. My issue is more with the council than with the owners. My issue first is if the premises is not gonna be used for a dog kennel, why is the license will be taken off? They promise that they're not gonna use it as a kennel, right? Overnight sleeping dogs and that kind of stuff. Then why the license or the permit wouldn't be omitted or taken off?
Excuse
That's
me,
one.
Larry, I believe that license was lapsed and it's no longer.
It no
enforced.
longer exists.
It does not exist to my knowledge. Can anyone back that up?
I mean, I don't know. It's hard.
It has expired.
It has expired, but we no longer have a license for that property. By law enforcement no longer allows kennels.
So there is no canine permit. Right?
Currently, no, there is not, and it would not meet any of the requirements for
Okay.
one in future.
That's one issue I had to know. The next thing is, as I said, and this is actually comes to the, not to the owners, but to you guys. That it's gonna be only 2 or 3 shows every year on the weekends, I'm talking about mostly. Is this gonna be in writing? Or not? Is it gonna be a writing that, look, we're gonna have 2, 3 shows every year? That's fine. We can live with that. I think everybody can live with that. But is it gonna be every weekend? I don't know. That's, but I mean, I can say whatever I want now, but unless I see it in writing, I'm not gonna really know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I make a clarification on something?
Again, it's Loretta Smith. And as I said before, I also have permission to speak to my father-in-law, Terry E. Smith, who owns property right next door. Prior to, Lori and Max having bought this property, that was my brother-in-law's property. Like there was somebody in between for a very short period of time, but it was my brother-in-law's property. And he did have a kennel. Parking, which Larry speaks to, was an issue even with that because they had shows. My father-in-law lent them the use of the laneway to his property and the piece of property that is right behind the kennel for parking. And I know that he will allow that. If that becomes one of the issues that stands in your way from saying, well, we don't have enough parking and all that sort of stuff, that those agreements have already been taken care of. So if that becomes a stumbling block, you can take that off the table. That privately has been taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I'm sorry, just one moment, Elena. Did you have someone online?
Yes, I have someone online who question.
Do you want to bring them in and then we'll move to, I think the planner has a follow-up.
Thank you. I'm bringing in Martha Josephian. Hi, Martha. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Actually, I'm not Martha. I'm Raymond. It's Raymond and Martha. Martha, I just had to step away. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I have listened to this from the beginning of the session, and I echo the sentiments of the neighbors and the clients who spoke so highly of Max and Lori. And we have a dog that's 3.5 years old. And for 3 years, we have taken our dog to Max and Lori's place. It started at another location, and now the location that we are discussing. I cannot think of taking our dog anywhere else. Our dog used to bark. It does not anymore. Max and Lori, he showed discipline. And we drive half an hour to get to Max and Lori's each way, so that our dog can spend some time there. That's how much we value it. At the beginning, it sounded crazy, but it's certainly well worth it. Now, allow me to tell you something a little bit different than what everybody else has told you so far. My mom was a teacher for 40 years. And when she became a teacher, she went into the teaching because of her passion. As I've grown older and as I have kids, I've noticed that teaching has changed a little bit. Hopefully not all of it, but it has a little bit. The newer generation, some get into the teaching because of the vacations, because the money, because of the pension. It's not necessarily all because of the passion. Max and Lori are incredibly passionate about what they're doing. And for that, I take my hat off to them. I think they are great entrepreneurs. I think they teach discipline to the dogs as well as the owners. And I would really, really like you to think strongly about allowing two passionate people who are doing things to better what already exists. Thank you for allowing me to talk.
Thank you very much for your comments. Right, well, if there's no one else offering any comments, then I'm going to turn this over. I'm sorry, Mr. Finlay, you have.
Yeah, it's, I had a summary statement, which I'm not going to read because these people, well, but I'm going to be, but the only point I'd ask council to consider is the proposed zoning that's before you is it's got a holding provision on it for a site plan control to enter into, and I'm not sure that your site plan control provisions of your official plan would allow you to enforce a site plan agreement. So I'm just asking council to deal with the application tonight without a holding provision. Rezone the property. The site's pretty well developed. You know, I look at it when I understand. So, you know, rather than, you know, site plan, again, that's to take quite a while. And first we heard of it was through the planning report here. And so, again, I would just ask council to pass the zoning, allowing the dog daycare without a whole provision. So the council.
Thanks, Mr. Finlay. And Alana, did you have something else you'd like to add? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So a comment was made regarding the expansion of the proposed business and concerns with that. Should council wish to approve the subject application, consideration should be given to placing the holding provision on the subject plans, which would require site plan control, and that would ensure the orderly development of the lands. It would be, the site plan agreement would be registered on title, and any expansions would need to go through the site plan process. As mentioned, permitted uses stay with the properties regardless of ownership. So should Doggo Den decide to sell the property in the future, it's not guaranteed that the new business would operate the same way. I also wanted to note that the draft alternate resolution was shared with the applicant and the agent prior to posting the agenda, and no concerns were raised at that time. I also wanted to note it was a question about the site-specific zoning was asked. So this proposed zoning bylaw amendment, sorry, the A-66 zone, that would be site-specific to the property. So it wouldn't be for every property, it would be specific to whatever property it's zoned. And I did want to note that the official plan does speak to agricultural related uses, including kennels, being subject to site plan control. So that is why it is being proposed as an alternate resolution.
Thank you, Alana. Okay, so all right, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the members of council to ask any questions or comment on its application. Councilor Heyman, did you have something you wish to say?
In a good way. My concerns are addressed or capable of being addressed, but
I know we heard a lot of good things and we've heard some valid concerns. I just want to provide a little bit of background and unpack some of the things in the potential alternative. We have granted a kennel zoning. I know this is not a kennel. In where there were proximity to neighbors before. And when on the basis that we did that was the basis that that individual had, similar to today, a large amount of support from their direct neighbors. And so again, we're not trying to be council or a municipality of no. So we do have that record or that precedent. But at the same time, properties do change hands, and we do have to look out for the long-term interests of the neighbors. And so, and that is when we made sure that there was actually a kennel license so that you can be zoned, but you also need a municipal license. And if for whatever reason, the things did not go the way that they were supposed to go, and that there are negative effects on the community, that license can be rescinded. So I'm just saying this in the sense that we're not writing blank check in this instance. We still have an intention to exercise regulation over these activities. Right, and I think that the concern about, potential expansion, you have the example of how site plan, if there were future building permits or future expansions or future use changes, then the site plan would also regulate that. And there's also the bylaw enforcement of the license. And, I think it's difficult. I believe we have the situation of square pegging around, right? And I know the owners have had experiences with bylaw, and I know that probably wasn't a great feeling. So I don't think they want to do it again, right? But there are multiple layers of regulation that are in place in order to maintain orderly conduct in business. So that's it. I think that there are appropriate ways that we can mitigate any negative effects and allow for this new innovative use.
Thank you, Councillor Hayman. Is there any, Councillor Crockett?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think similarly to Tom, just to kind of wrap up the comments that were being put forward, is that it's noted that there was extensive measures to mitigate the noise in this area, whether it's the training, whether it's the additional building aspects as well. The daily hours of operation and the low attendance numbers of dogs also assists with that. I think regarding the parking, that was addressed in the neighboring areas as well. But towards Larry's concerns about events and being relatively new to the area, there are a number of areas within Thames Centre that support dog shows or things like that, such as the fairgrounds, and there's also a larger facility on Eaton Road if you do expand past your limits. So I think there's a lot of support for those here. Otherwise, I just wanted to say that in our strategic plan specifically, we are looking at differentiating agribusinesses around the community, and this aligns with that. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Crockett. Comments from anyone else? Deputy Mayor Smider.
Thank you. I do think that this is an innovative opportunity in business at Thames Centre. I was pleasantly surprised when I went on site. I did not hear part. I probably hear more working in the neighborhood than I did on that property. So I do feel that the concerns that have been raised have been adequately addressed or can be addressed.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Lockyer.
Your Worship, this is just a general question. Probably to say, has there been any noise complaints about this business?
No. Yeah, the bylaw enforcement and compliance works through the clerk, and I'm getting into shaking that we have not received any application on. Thank you.
No, to you, Your Worship. At this time, we've never received a bylaw zoning, like a bylaw noise complaint. Our own we had concern, we did receive one concern, so. Otherwise, there has been 0 noise concerns.
Okay. So, council, we're at the point where we're ready to make the decision. We have the recommended decision to refuse, and then we also have the secondary approval motion. Councilor Hayden?
Yes, I would like to make a motion in favor of this alternative motion to accept. So. And without the whole. Without the
Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councilor Lockie? All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you all for your attendance here tonight.
Congratulations.
Yes. Just so everyone's aware, we'll take about a 5-minute recess here while we wait for Mr. Finlay to come back in.
Yeah.
Okay, council, and staff, we'll get back to the order of business here. So the next item on the agenda is item 7.3, zoning bylaw amendment application Z8-24, Kevin and Jody McGuffin applicant, Stuart Finlater and Associates, Inc. as the agent, and the property is 22803 Missouri Road. And we ask, turn this over to Alana Cortez, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. So the purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment application is to rezone the balance of the farm to prohibit any new residential use consistent with provincial policy and local planning policy. So the subject property is a 130-acre farm located on the west side of Missouri Road, south of Clever Mills Road, and backing onto the Thames River. According to the Thames Center official plan, the lands are designated agricultural and protection area, and the lands are zoned agricultural and environmental protection. The applicants are proposing to rezone the lands to be retained through application B6-2024, which was a consent application that was conditionally approved by council on May 27th, 2024. And they're looking to rezone the balance of the farm to the site-specific A-45 zone to prohibit any new residential use. So a rezoning application was required as a condition of consent to prohibit residential uses on the lands to be retained. All other criteria of section 2.27.3 to facilitate a surplus farmland severance has been met or are capable of being met through conditions of consent. Based on the foregoing, the subject application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and in conformity with the County of Middlesex and Thames Center official plans. From the circulation of the subject application, no comments were or no concerns were provided by the county engineer, drainage superintendent, or the chief building official. And then in the circulation of the notice to property owners, no public comments have been received. So staff recommend that the zoning bylaw amendment application be approved and that the implementing bylaw be approved as included in the bylaw portion of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Alana. Stuart, do you have anything you wish to add?
No, thank you.
I'm taking it the applicant is not in the room either. Okay, all right. And we have no one online then?
There's no one online, Your Worship.
Okay, so, any questions from the members of council then? Okay, if that's the no questions from council, then, I'm sorry, there being no further discussion, the meeting, the public meeting is now closed and we'll move to the decision. Do I have a mover on the recommended motion as appended to the agenda to approve zoning bylaw amendment Z8-24 and its implementing bylaw as included in the bylaw portion of the agenda? Moved by Councillor Heenan and seconded by Deputy Mayor Smybert. All in favor? Thank you, that motion passes. Thank you. All right, I'm moving the seconder to close the public meeting, please. And the time is 6:23 p.m. Deputy Mayor Smybert and Councillor Crockett. All in favor? Thank you, that carries. Great. Now, is citywide ready?
Hi, Elio, Jasmine, can you hear us okay?
Hi.
You can hear us? Jasmine, can you hear us?
I can hear. Can you hear me?
Okay, and we've got you then too. And Elio, we have you as well.
All
right?
That's great.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, so
Do you want to go ahead when you're ready then?
so let's start by sharing my my screen first and foremost. And I guess with this, now that the technical issues are behind us, the topic of today's presentation is presenting the results of your 2024 asset management plan. My name is Elio Ibrahim. I'm a senior advisor and a team lead at PST, and I will be delivering this presentation today. So first and foremost, let's maybe discuss the reasons behind developing such an asset management plan. And the reason behind this is a regulatory reason to a certain extent, which is the Ontario Regulation 588/17. So according to the regulation,
developing asset management plans has been phased into a few phases. Phase one was due in 2022, and that phase really focused on the core assets. And by core assets, I mean roads, bridges, water systems, wastewater systems, and stormwater infrastructure. And the goal of this plan was to look at the cost of ownership of these assets and what's required in terms of life cycle management strategies in order to maintain the current levels of service that we're providing as a township. What's the focus of today's session, or what was due for July of 2024, was basically an asset management plan focusing on current levels of service for core and non-core assets. So that would include on top of core assets, vehicles, machinery, equipment, buildings, land improvements and parks, etc. So that's included as part of today's discussion, also focusing on providing the current levels of service that you're providing and what's required from a life cycle management perspective in order to provide these current levels of service. Now, something that's a part of this project that we're working on with the township is basically developing your 2025 asset management plan as well. And for that 2025 asset management plan, the focus would be really on the proposed levels of service. So we'll be trying to bridge the gap between the current and proposed. And in order to do that, one thing that we have to acknowledge is that whenever we work on current levels of service asset management plans, we're basically recording the status quo. And based on the level of performance, based on the risk levels, and based on the level of funding, some decisions should be made in order to discuss what could be achieved in terms of proposed levels of service, and we're going to be discussing that in a bit. So typically, whenever developing such a presentation, I always like to start by defining asset management as service management, because effectively these assets are the backbone of the services that they do provide. So imagine having roads and bridges that lead to nowhere. Effectively, they would be useless. So the reason why we take care of these assets and maintain them to be in a good state of repair is to make sure that the services that they are providing remain uninterrupted. Because effectively, any water system should be designed in a way that treats water adequately and conveys water to homes, etc. The same case applies to some other asset categories included as part of the scope, such as the stormwater infrastructure that is designed to make sure that we don't have any floodings happening and that properties and businesses and life in general is protected from such instances. But infrastructure doesn't stop here, and we have some other types of facilities or parks for soft infrastructure, as you may call it, that would really enhance the quality of life. So therefore, we have to think about the system in a holistic way and look at the overall long-term cost whenever deciding what to do in terms of service management with these assets that provide these services. And in order for us to do that, we use the practice that's called asset management. So what we have to acknowledge in this case is that there is typically a desire to provide the best level of service possible whenever dealing with municipal services. But one thing that one has to acknowledge is that these municipal services come at a very high cost, especially nowadays because of inflation, supply chain issues, and what's so on, what's so forth. So therefore, we need a practice that would help us design that balance or that equilibrium between the cost, performance, and risk. And that practice is asset management specific. So in order to do that, what we have to analyze, or what's typically analyzed within asset management plans, is what is the total cost of ownership of these assets that are providing these services, and what is typically required from a life cycle management strategy in order to make sure that these assets are providing the services that they should be providing at a reasonable cost, while making sure that risk is kept at a minimum. And what we're going to be presenting today is, again, your 2024 asset management plan, which is based on year-end data from 2023. So let's start by discussing some of the findings of this plan, and let's maybe look at the total replacement cost of your asset portfolio, excuse me. So it's around 426 or $427 million, which is quite significant. And if we do look at the distribution, we would be able to see that the core assets, along with buildings and facilities, form the biggest portion of your asset portfolio, which is very typical for a municipality of your size. Now, if we do look at things from a per capita perspective, and this is a very strong message to send here, for everybody living in town, there's an equivalent of $30,000 worth of infrastructure for every person that's living in town. So that number would be a bit higher if we calculate it per household. The Canadian average, according to some numbers released by FCM, is around $100,000 per household in terms of municipal infrastructure, which is quite significant, and which is something people tend to ignore to a certain extent whenever dealing with the cost of living or the cost of housing or quality of life in general. So this being said, in other terms, for every house to exist in a typical town, such as Thames Center, that house would require around $100,000 worth of infrastructure for it to be provided with the services that it should be receiving in order to maintain a certain quality of life. Now, if we take a deeper dive into the actual data and into the actual state of the infrastructure or the actual condition of your assets, one thing to highlight here, which is actually a positive sign, is that 76% of your assets are in fair or better condition based on the data that was available at the time of the analysis. And that data was based on some reports such as the OSIM inspections, such as some assessments that were done to your roads in 2020. And again, this is a good sign because we're basing this assumption on some assessed condition data and not relying so much on age for the asset categories mentioned here, such as the bridges and culverts as well as roads. But there are more work to be done because effectively, whenever dealing with that exercise, and this is why the province has phased that into a few phases, there's always more need to collect more data and to refine the data and to look at data from a dynamic perspective in order to make sure that whatever analysis we're making is based on that data or is basically evidence driven. Because effectively, whenever we're dealing with such a long-term planning exercise, we would use that data that's typically condition data or financial data or whatsoever in order for us to plan ahead for the future and to know, based on the asset condition or based on its age and based on its location, etc., what would be the optimal life cycle scenario to employ. And for this asset management plan, we've included all of the assets, core and non-core, and we've looked at end-of-life scenario for most of the assets except for the road network, and we'll discuss what that would look like in a bit. So effectively, for most of the assets in the plan, we've estimated what could be an estimated useful life for that asset, and based on its actual condition or based on its actual age, we've predicted when this asset would require a certain type of intervention, which could be a replacement or a rehabilitation activity. For the actual road network, we've built some more complex models that take into account many activities that may happen over the life cycle of the asset in order to capture the overall life cycle cost. And in order to do that, what we've taken into account is whatever activity you may apply on these assets, depending on specific trigger points, the impact of these activities was calculated as well, along with the cost in order for us to be able to calculate the long-term requirements of owning and operating these assets. So as you can see here, we have many events and many that are taking place in different time intervals or depending on different condition ranges, such as crack sealing, single surface treatment, double surface treatment, all the way to a full reconstruction of the asset. What this would result in is the following capital projection graph. And by looking at this graph, you can see that there are some ups and downs in terms of infrastructure investment. And this is something typical. So in order to account for these ups and downs, we calculate something that's called the annual capital requirements, or in other terms, the long-term average of infrastructure expenditures that should be spent in order to maintain the current levels of service that you're providing. So that number is around $9 million. Or in other terms, you should be spending or saving around $9 million a year in order to sustainably fund the assets that you own and operate. An additional piece to the equation here is looking at the infrastructure backlog. And the infrastructure backlog would typically mean deferred maintenance. And this is typically activities that should have been performed, but they haven't been performed yet on these assets. And it's typically due to a lack of funding maybe, or to some data issues when it comes to condition and whatnot. If we look at the infrastructure backlog from a more detailed perspective, we'll see that for the most part, the elements that do fall within that backlog are buildings and facilities, fleet, some road network elements, as well as some water distribution elements. And again, this analysis does depend on the best data available at the time of the analysis. So whenever condition data was available, we've included that in the analysis in order to account for more accurate capital projections. But whenever that condition data was not available, we've used age-based data in order to calculate these capital projections to a certain extent, which means that the number that you see here might be a bit lower in reality, because if a certain asset is expected to live for, or expected to be in service for 10 years, and it's at year 12 of its expected useful life, it will show up in the backlog if we're only basing our analysis on age. However, it could be the case where that asset is actually still in a good shape, and it could still serve for another couple of years, or what so forth. And therefore, it shouldn't be really showing as part of the backlog, but that would require data refinements and data cleansing in order to make sure that we're accounting for the right capital expenditures. But in all cases, using a more conservative scenario is better than using a scenario that's a bit more optimistic in this case. Therefore, when it comes to this piece, as part of the overall recommendations and as part of some other elements within the project, we do always recommend that you focus as much as possible on condition assessment strategies and really focus on capturing the right data for the assets that are in question to a certain extent. Now, if we look at some of the results, and if we compare that to your 2020 asset management plan, back then, according to the analysis, the tax-funded assets were funded at 55%. So these assets would include everything that's not water or wastewater. In other terms, from the long-term capital requirements, what you have available is equivalent to 55%. So, as an example, if your requirements were $1 million for the tax-funded assets, what you had available was $550,000 on a yearly basis. The number is a bit lower for the rate-funded assets, and by that I mean water and wastewater, and is about 29%. So effectively, we're operating at an infrastructure deficit that is more or less in the ballpark of where most of the other municipalities are operating in. Now, comparing these numbers to the numbers that we've calculated in today's AMP or in the 2024 AMP, your actual annual requirements have increased from $8.4 million from your previous plan that was done in 2020 to about $9 million in 2024, which is equivalent to around 7 to 8% in terms of increase. And the reason for that could be many things, such as asset additions, the actual replacement costing going up, etc. Which would mean effectively that from an infrastructure deficit perspective, you're probably still operating around the same zone. Your deficit might have gone up if your taxes were not keeping up with the actual inflation to a certain extent. With this being said, whenever we do look at such an analysis, we don't take into account any funding that is not considered sustainable. And for a funding to be considered sustainable, it has to be a funding that's recurring for more than three years, according to the province of Ontario. So typically look at gas tax, the OSIF, and your property taxation, or the rates that you do collect to fund these assets. Effectively, assuming that we're still operating around the same level from a funding perspective, it is always recommended that whenever we start talking about any changes when it comes to taxations or to the revenue streams, to take into account what's considered a proposed level of service or what's desired from a levels of service outcome. Because again, what we're dealing with here is a combination of cost, performance, and risk. So if we look at the technical definition of what we consider a level of service, it's the coordinated activity of an organization to realize value from assets. So effectively, using the same equation again, we want to look at cost and see what's affordable and what's not. And we also want to look at the risk levels of not meeting some acceptable levels of service in some cases, and therefore look at the optimal performance that's required in order to make sure that the services are being provided in a way that's safe and reliable, but that in a way that's also taking into account this financial sustainability aspect of service delivery. This is a typical example of what a level of service could look like from a presentation perspective. So let's maybe look at the percentage of parks and recreational areas that are in good or very good condition. Currently, you're at 83%, which is a great indication, because this means that most of your assets from a parks and recreation perspective are in good or better condition, which means that you're providing a very good levels of service there. But in order to decide on what's up for the future, we would need to look at the financial aspect and see if we do have enough money in order to maintain that level of service, or if we need to maybe do some reallocations. This could be an area where you're already providing a great level of service. If this gets decreased to 75% and in comparison to 83%, in the grand scheme of things, the service remains provided in an uninterrupted manner. But then you may be able to reallocate some funds and fund another service that's underfunded, and that's an example there. In terms of the key takeaways from this plan, having completed this, you're compliant with the 2024 regulation requirements. But there are lots of work that should still be done in order to become compliant with the proposed levels of service asset management plan that's due in 2025. One thing that is very important to highlight is that whenever we're dealing with a current asset management plan, it's a snapshot in time. And this is typically considered a process and not a project. And therefore, lots of data refinements and lots of data upgrades could result in better outcomes or in more accurate outcomes. Effectively, saying this in other terms, this document shouldn't be collecting dust, as it should be kept as a dynamic document that gets updated whenever it needs to be updated or whenever better data becomes available. Effectively, with this asset management plan, now you have your asset information centralized in one single source of truth, which is a great communication tool that could be used to communicate among staff, to council, and with the public as well, because effectively all of these services are meant to serve the public in some ways. In terms of what's included as part of our scope beyond the 2024 asset management plan that we've discussed today, there's going to be a development for a data governance policy and some data management procedures in order to make sure that whenever you're taking this process and applying modifications or applying updates to your inventory and to your asset management plan, that there are some ways or some techniques and some tools that are used to make sure that the data is flowing in the right direction and that data is being stored in the right places in order for you to use it for any sort of analysis that you may require it for. Some additional data work would happen before the 2025 plan, and that would include some integration of ongoing condition assessments for your water and wastewater mains, and therefore that would increase the level of data quality, which would result in better capital projections in terms of spending. Some other activities would take into account data consolidation as well to make sure that whatever you have in asset records is actually unified across the board. And last but not least, once we develop some better understanding of your actual deficit at this point in time compared to 2020, this is when we can start looking at the current levels of service and looking at the affordability and the performance of these services. And we can then start having some discussions around whether these services that are being provided being provided at an acceptable performance level. And if not, what should be the investment in order to make sure that these levels of service are adequate? In order for us to know what are the investments required, we'd have to build the life cycle models that would basically enable us to provide some better services or higher performance levels in some areas, which would help us eventually develop a financial plan that would help you reach a sustainable funding level from a sustainable funding sources perspective. With this being said, I'll open up the floor to any questions.
Thanks very much, Mr. Ibrahim. Just before we go to that, do I have consensus from council to move to item 10.2, the asset management plan? And if so, I'd ask the Director of Financial Services to come. Are we doing with that? Okay, all right. Emily, if you like.
Your worship, thank you, council, and to Citywide for joining us tonight. The purpose of this report is to adopt the updated asset management plan for the municipality of Thames Centre as per legislative requirements, which you heard in tonight's presentation. With this proposed update for the asset management plan, it would mean that we're in compliance with the regulation as of July 1st, 2024, and it includes all municipal infrastructure assets and identifies current levels of services and those costs of maintaining those levels of services. As Citywide has alluded to, in 2025, we would be looking at additional requirements, including proposed levels of service, which would incorporate feedback from yourselves as well as the public, as well as then we would look at a growth and the financial management strategy, which is a key component of any asset management plan. As they've alluded to as well, it's important to note that an asset management plan represents a snapshot in time, and that this was based on the data that we had at the moment, so our best available processes and information within our systems. At this point, we are looking towards 2025 as an opportunity to improve our data governance policies, processes, and workflows, and to help and standardize our methodologies and ensure consistency. Any projected costs associated with implementing this asset management plan would be incorporated into future budget discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. So at this time, does council have any questions of either Emily or the presenters? Deputy Mayor Sleeper.
Mayor McMillan, and I'm not sure if this is for Emily or for the consultants, but just looking ahead to 2025, and that's gonna be an interesting process. I just wanted to get some more information if I can about how you reconcile what residents within the community want in terms of service delivery versus what we can afford to provide.
Yeah,
first
I can
you
ask.
Go ahead then. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I can answer that question. Typically, whenever engaging in public engagement, I guess when you ask people what they want anything and everything, right? And that's understandable. So one strategy that is essential here is to make sure that the surveys include a portion that's related to the willingness to pay. And in order to convey the right message, in order to, I guess, inform people how expensive it is to provide infrastructure services, some figures can be included from the asset management plan, and one of them is how much infrastructure is required for every house that's or every household that's within the community. Now, one other methodology that has proven to be very effective is benchmarking against neighboring municipalities as well. And typically, this data would be available online because the asset management plan is a public-facing document. So effectively, if you do benchmark against other municipalities and look at the levels of service that they're providing, look at their taxes as well, you'd give the public the choice of choosing whether, and if they want higher levels of service in terms of performance, this comes at a cost. And in the asset management plan, that cost would be reflected based on the scenarios provided. So you'd have some data to back up any discussion or any scenario you want to propose to the public.
Thank you. Emily, would you like to add something?
Yeah, if I could just add to that, through your worship, would be that also when we're conducting any kind of consultation, we would take into account the strategic plan approved by council, which also had public consultation, as well as the budget, our master plans. All of these plans would come together as part of your asset management plan development. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councilor Heeman?
Yes, just through your worship, just a question of consultation further. It's are there any additional tools, or are we gonna go line by line and kind of that's after establishing a baseline? There's we do a lot of things. So yeah.
I'll defer to Citywide because I think they've done this before with other communities. If you wanted to provide some answers as to how you would do the public consultation, some different strategies.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and effectively, lots of municipalities in Ontario are engaging in this right now. There are many ways and many tools that are typically used. There's an education aspect that should be taken into account, and lots of municipalities have done that by, I guess, sending brochures to the residents' homes, posting some educational videos on their website, and there's lots of resources. One of them that I can name is the Federation of Canadian Municipality. They have lots of good videos and tutorials that would explain to the public the cost of infrastructure ownerships and the concepts of levels of service and risk and whatnot. Now, in terms of the actual surveys, different municipalities, depending on the side, have on their size, have used different techniques. Some small municipalities were sending these surveys with the tax bills, so that people can relate the service aspect to the tax aspect. Some others have conducted online surveys, so it would typically depend on your previous engagements and what has worked and what hasn't really achieved any results for you. So if there was any strategy that you've used for the master plan or the official plans or whatnot, if it did result in some high, I guess, response rates, I would recommend you use the same strategy, because it's basically the same concept of public engagement for this plan or for other strategic plans.
Anything else? Councillor Lockwood.
For your worship to citywide, so I recognize that this, it doesn't factor in, growth, it's basically kind of a 1-for-1, but does it factor in, like any impact from climate change, more specifically to like stormwater management?
Correct. And if you do look at the levels of service portion, there are many metrics that are basically related to climate change, such as 1 in a 5-year storm or 1 in a 100-year storm, and the percentage of properties that are basically resilient to such an event. And this is typically a risk element or a levels of service element that's regulated by the province. But for such a piece of information, it would all depend on the data available to calculate these calculations. But that's one of the elements where we discuss climate change, but it's also discussed as part of the risk analysis for some of the sections, as you can see in the report.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions before we move on? Councillor Crockett.
Through you, Mayor McMillan. I just have 2 questions, I guess, and a comment, both of which actually pertain to the results or the study that was shown, but I believe they're staff questions. But I'll let whomever answer appropriately. The first one is, does the perceived improvements align with the recent studies that we've already seen completed in our term of council, such as roads and recreational studies?
Emily, would you like to answer that? Who would like to?
Yeah, I can start, Mayor. Thank you. Pass to the
Mr. Bear.
respective directors. So I think it was referenced in what we have before us today. The current status doesn't take into account the actual condition of our roads as an example. So this time next year, 2025, you'll see better data, more up-to-date data with respect to the actual conditions of many of our assets. You'll see improvement. Some of these bar graphs show some red based on, I think, purely age of the asset. However, we have made improvements, and so when you do the conditions, which we have much of that information, that will reflect to a greater degree of accuracy of where we're really at, certainly on roads as well as facilities. I referenced previously as well, council's approving building condition assessments, so we'll have those up to date. So be more reflective of the actual condition of our assets as part of the 2025. And happy if any other director wants to add.
Anyone else like to add?
I have a part 2 that I think is for Jared. So I think we can all agree that infrastructure debt isn't unique to just Thames Center. But regarding the largest kind of red areas, improvements or replacements of the fleet and roadways, are these currently addressed in the current plan in place for regular updates year-over-year?
To your worship, and I'll just repeat what David said. The reason that there's so much red in there is just because there wasn't a lot of data has not been uploaded to this report. We do road condition assessments, and like physically look at the condition of that road. That would score that road in a much higher category than just an age-based category. So again, your 2025 numbers should look a lot different than what you're seeing right now. To the a lot more positive, I should say. It's just we do condition assessments every 2 years, but they just haven't been updated to the citywide data portal yet.
Thank you. Appreciate the answer. Sounds positive.
I said that twice.
Thanks. Any other questions from council before we move on? Okay, then, excuse me. Do I have a mover on the recommended motion as printed to the agenda to adopt the updated asset management plan? Deputy Mayor Smyper and Councillor Crockett, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay. That motion passes, thank you. So at this point, we'll move, and I'd like to thank Citywide for their presentation tonight. Thank you very much. You know, it's a lot of work. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Item number 8 on your agenda, 8.1, the regular council minutes of June 24th. I'm sorry, that the minutes of the meeting, regular council meeting on June 24th be approved as circulated. The mover and second. Councilor Crockett. And. Excuse me, I've been battling this all day. So we have a mover and a seconder, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion carries, thank you. Moving on to item number 9. May I ask the deputy mayor to go through this, please?
Item number 9 is the consent agenda. And the items that need to be removed for consideration.
Deputy Mayor, I would appreciate removing item 9.1 for comment.
Councilor Hume.
Item 9.5.
So just a motion then to receive all items except for 9.1 and 9.2. I get a move and second of this. Councilor Crockett, second by Councilor Hume. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, 9.1.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to pull 9.1 as it regards to school bus safety, which is a continued topic that we have here in Thames Centre. An unfortunate one with that. I would just like to thank the ladies for this support. And I would like to ask Director Craven if there's any update on the Thames Centre specific signage referenced by Mr. Trainee and the Middlesex County in a conversation a few months ago.
The Deputy Mayor. Spoke with the engineer, Chris Trainee, he was unable to give me an update. He promised me he would. He was dealing with the rain event that we had today. I was surprised I didn't hear anything back from him before the meeting tonight here, but I will follow up with him tomorrow morning.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilor Crockett. Councilor Heyman, you wanted to talk to item 9.5.
I just wanted to inquire if this was the appropriate time to grant the access, or if the access has been granted on some sort of service agreement.
Services.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, the fire chief has given them permission to use the parking lot, which is my understanding all they needed. He does have that authority through delegated authority positional cost to that. They just wanted you guys to be aware and see if you supported their event.
Thank you.
So further action then to take on it. Okay, thank you. Okay. Yes. Okay, moving on to reports of the departments. The first item is municipal funding agreement for the Canada Community Building Fund. I'm not sure who's speaking to this item. Dr. Sal.
Thank you, through the Deputy Mayor. The purpose of this report is for council to consider approval of the new Canada Community Building Fund municipal funding agreement with AMO. This fund was previously known as the Federal Gas Tax Funding and was launched in 2005. Since then, the municipality of Thames Centre has received approximately $8.2 million in federal gas tax funding, also known as CCBF. As per the agreement attached, it covers a 10-year period, and it also includes 18 funding categories. Historically, this funding source has been used primarily by our local roads And over the next 5 years, we've been allocated about $2.3 million. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Conway? I have simple questions. So the amounts that are outlined in the report, are these guaranteed upon signing?
Through the Deputy Mayor, yes.
And second to that is, how are these monies divided up during the budget process?
Again, through the Deputy Mayor, these funds are allocated to eligible capital projects through our annual budget process. And as I said, they've historically gone to local roads, but that again would be reviewed in agreement, in alignment with the agreement for the categories.
Perfect, thank you. Any other questions, comments? If not, there is a recommended motion. Do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Hamer, seconded by Councillor Crockett, that a report F524 be received for information, and that council authorize staff to sign the Canada Community Building Fund municipal funding agreement with AMO related to the funding provided by the government of Canada as shown in the bylaw portion of the agenda. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you.
I think we can do it now. Please. Time will come. Thanks for your patience. We'll move on now to 10.3, and Emily, again, this is to present the financial report as of June 30th, 24.
Thank you, through your worship. As stated, this is the purpose of this report is to provide a financial report as of June 30th, 2024. And when we look at this statement, it's important to note that it's difficult for us to predict our year-end financial position at this point in time, because there's a number of entries that we wait until year-end to do. So for example, long-term debt, reserves, development charges. There's also account variances that will always exist due to timing and the seasonality of certain events within our municipality, as well as some expense account postings such as interdepartmental transactions are not done until year-end. And of course, there's also the fact that we only have our interim tax bill out at this point. We are looking towards our final tax bill soon, so we only see about 50% of the revenues. But at this point in time, we are sitting at a projected surplus position, with the only one showing in a deficit is general government, again, mostly largely due to the timing of property tax revenue. But happy to answer any questions, as well as the other members of the senior management team are here to assist.
Thanks. Emily, are there any questions from the members of council? No? In that particular case, do I have a mover for the recommended motion to receive the report for information? Deputy Mayor Slimer, and seconded by Councillor Crockett, that this report be received for information. All in favor? That carries. Thank you very much. Item number 10.4, the PowerPoint presentation by Marian Love. And she's on her way in, I guess.
Yes, she's online, your worship.
Okay, go ahead, whenever.
Hi, Marianne, can you hear us okay?
I can. Hello, good evening, everyone. Nice to be with you folks again this evening, and I believe I have two presentations to present. And it looks like the first one I'm going to be doing is the compensation review for elected officials. I don't have the agenda in front of me, your worship, but if the second item follows right afterwards, I can run right into that, or I can wait. I'll just follow your lead. Okay,
I think that would be okay.
Okay,
Go ahead.
thank you. Okay, great, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I'll take the next slide. Okay, so compensation for elected officials at the municipality was last reviewed in 2022. And there were changes made to the base pay rates to reflect the 55th percentile of the defined pay market. The primary objective of the review this year was to conduct a review of the base pay and other elements of pay for the mayor, the deputy mayor, and the councillor positions using an updated comparator group. I reviewed municipal comparator information that was collected by the Thames Centre HR manager, and I prepared the base pay market summary using various percentile targets. Just as a by way of further background, this study follows after the 2024 compensation study that was completed for the employee group, which is often the case with municipalities. We come in and update council compensation as well, based on the current pay market of the year. So these recommendations in the report are prepared for council's consideration this evening. I'll take the next slide. So this slide sets out the base pay rates for each of the positions, mayor, deputy mayor, and councillor. I won't go through them, but you can see them here. There are no additional meeting per diems provided. There are per diems of $182 per half day for the purpose of attendance at conferences and workshops. Meal expenses reimbursed with supporting receipts. Kilometerage expense is reimbursed at current CRA rates. Laptop, tablet is provided, and cell phone is provided, or cell phone expenses reimbursed at $40 a month. Health and dental benefits are provided on a 50% co-pay premium basis. There are no there is no owners participation or RSP contributions made. And with Thames Centre, base pay is typically adjusted annually as at January 1st with the same economic adjustment that's provided to employees. So this is our current state. I'll take the next slide. By way of overall summary, I've referenced the base pay rates. You can see them reflected here again at the top of the slide. These are the current rates for mayor, deputy mayor, and councillor. When we compare these base pay rates to the base pay rates in the comparator group, the remuneration for all of these positions is low to the defined pay market when we're looking at the 60th percentile pay target, and I'll talk a bit about that in a minute. The per diem rate for conference attendance is above the competitive pay market. Other elements of remuneration are generally comparable. I'll take the next slide. So these next few slides go down a little deeper in terms of the methodology and just taking a little bit closer look at the source data. The market comparator group was selected having regard to local regional comparators, and the comparator group that was selected for the 2024 employee compensation study. So we had two sort of lenses on this. All in, we collected pay data from 8 comparators. A custom survey was prepared using the data from these municipal organizations you see on slide: Ingersoll, Middlesex Centre, Strathroy, Caradoc, Norfolk, Norwich, Stratford, Woodstock, and Thora. 3 of the comparators were also included in the 24 compensation study. So again, 2 lenses on this, looking at local regional and also looking at some of the comparators used in the compensation study for staff. The ones that were used in the compensation study for staff are Ingersoll, Middlesex Centre, and Strathroy, Caradoc. All in, Thames Centre is relatively placed within the comparator group and having regard to various indicators such as size, operating expenditures, population, and size of budget. In terms of, or size of council. In terms of size of council, for the comparators, they range from 5 to 12 members and 7 members. Take the next slide. Again, in terms of the observations, the base pay compensation for mayor, deputy mayor, and council positions was reviewed and compared to the defined pay market. For the majority of our comparators, base pay compensates for council meetings, committee meetings, and special meetings of council. There was one comparator that reported additional per diems for attendance at public meetings to supplement their base pay rates. But for all intents and purposes, the method of payment in terms of what is included in base pay rates is pretty consistent amongst the comparator group. Take the next one. This slide drills down a little bit in terms of the comparative analysis. So here on this slide, you can see our positions: mayor, deputy mayor, and councillor down the left-hand side of the screen. And then as we move across the right, you can see that based on the number of observations, which is the number of matches for each of the positions, you can see with each one, we had a match for each: mayor, deputy mayor, and councillor. You can see the percentile values. Market median is the 50th percentile. The 55th percentile is showing the 60th percentile and the 65th percentile. So you can see where we have the pluses, if you will. That means beside each one of these percentile targets, if we were to meet the target that's being identified, we would need to increase our base pay by the percentage that's shown. So for example, if we were looking, I'll just take a look at the market median. It happens to be the first one in the in the green, just to give you a read on the slide. If we are going to take a look at, say, for example, the counselor position, which is currently has a base pay rate of $18,153. The market median rate is $21,788. We would need to increase the base pay by 20% to get to that target. Okay, you can see on this slide that the P60 target is highlighted. That's the 60th percentile. This is the percentile that council has determined as the target for the employee compensation over the course of 2020 for the 2024 review. So I've highlighted it here for council's information as we're working through the results. And you can see as your eye moves across the screen, these percentile targets, the numbers are getting higher because there are higher values within the ranking of the 8 observations for each position, and therefore with higher targets, the gaps are broader, are bigger. That's really the read of the slide. And I'll take the next one. So the mayor base pay rates for Norfolk and Stratford are both single tier municipalities. I saw those as being outliers, all right, in relation to the market comparator group. And you can see the published or the reported values for each at 93,000 and about 84,000 respectively. And this is impacting what you saw on the previous slide. So therefore, taking Norfolk and Stratford out of the comparator group, and we have 6 comparators, it's showing the following. And you can see the numbers are markedly different. So if you take your eye down the 60th percentile column, you can see that the 60th percentile target for mayor is based on 6 comparators, 41,348. For the deputy mayor, it's 28,282. And for councilors, 22,616. All right, so it's the results are a bit more normative. I'll take the next slide. Thanks. So moving on to, again, a little bit more drill down on the base pay. Back in 2022, the compensation review at that time established base pay rates at the 55th percentile. All right, the compensation philosophy for the management non-union positions this year established a 60th percentile target. So just to step back, as we did when I was with you, in the last meeting where we presented the results for the staff positions, I'll talk a little bit about percentiles. Percentiles are really giving us a sense of how we rank or how we compare. So if we're looking at the 60th percentile target, and if it is, as we have here, 6 matches for a position, I'm able to rank those positions in the market from the highest market match to the lowest. The 60th percentile target is the dollar rate, where 60% of the wage rates in the comparator organization for that match are below and 40% are above. Okay, so the higher the percentile, the higher you're moving a little off of the median. Okay. The base pay rates for the mayor, deputy mayor, councilors are all below the 60th percentile, even with this modified comparator group. The market compensation for Thames Center's positions is as follows. The market rate for the mayor is 41,348. The ranges in the market range from 31,661 to 74,047. The market rate for the deputy mayor is $28,282. The pay rates range in the market group from 22,777 to 33,794. The market rate for councilor is 22,616, and the pay rates range from $15,970 to $31,189. So in each one of these cases, you can see by choosing a particular market, we are not paying the highest, proposing to pay the highest, not proposing to pay the lowest. The 60th percentile is just a little bit above the midpoint. Okay. So that pretty much takes care of the base pay rate analysis. There were other elements of remuneration that the data was collected on, so I can report on that as well. There are 4 comparators that are reporting that benefits are provided to all members of council. One is providing on a 50% co-pay basis. One provides 100% premium. One comparator provides benefits, but the premium is paid 100% by the official, and 2 comparators provide payment in lieu of benefits. One comparator out of the group provides owner's contributions for the mayor only, and a 9% RSP contribution for councillors. All comparators provide iPad laptop for all members of council. 4 comparators are reporting that a cell phone is provided or a monthly allowance for members. 1 comparator is reporting that per diems for conference attendance are at $160 per day and $125 for seminars. 3 comparators reporting meal allowance. The predominant values are $100 and $75 daily. And one comparator includes meals with a daily conference per diem. 3 report that meals are reimbursed with receipts. 7 comparators report that base pay rates are adjusted annually by an economic adjustment, and 4 comparators specifically state they're aligning their annual adjustment with staff or union cost of living increases. So you can see as we're looking at some of those pay practices that, we are sort of hitting the mark on a number of them. The comparator, just by way of conclusion, I think that the comparator group in its refined state with the group of 6 comparators is representative based on select criteria. The 60th percentile pay target is reasonable based on the size and scope and pay practice of the comparator group, and it aligns with the pay target for the employee group. The base pay rates for all 3 positions, mayor, deputy mayor, and councillor, would require an increase to meet the 60th percentile pay target. The daily per diem rate for conference attendance is high relative to the comparator group, but I really don't see that the daily per diem rate it makes up the majority of compensation. This is only for the purposes of attendance at conference. And I don't, that in some cases, there may be some members of council that don't attend any conferences. That information really wasn't provided. I'm just reporting on the observations based on the data that was provided. It's best practice in the sector to increase annual base pay for elected officials on a yearly basis by the amount used to adjust the employee salary grid. So we do that. And this allows for a year-over-year increase to align with cost of living increases. This is also supported, as you can see, by the survey results. It's also best practice to review compensation once during the term of council using a survey of comparative municipalities. Experience in the sector varies. Some municipalities or some councils will review their compensation rate after the employee compensation has been reviewed. Others will do it sort of in the last term or the last year of the term of council and move the increases on into the next term. It varies across the province, and it's really a matter of choice and decision of each respective council. We'll go to the next one. By way of recommendations, I'm recommending that council give consideration to implementing the following base pay adjustments. Council may wish to make these adjustments effective next year. Therefore, they would need to be further adjusted for COLA because these rates that you see on screen are 2024 rates. So the mayor rate of $41,348. The deputy mayor, $28,282, and the councillor rate of $22,616. Again, all would need to be adjusted for COLA moving forward. It's also recommended that council continue the practice of adjusting base pay for the elected officials annually by using the percentage adjustment provided for the employee salary grid. And it's also recommended that a compensation review be conducted once every 3 to 4 years. Using comparative survey data, the next review would then be during the next term of council. And your worship, that concludes, I believe, it concludes the presentation. I don't think there's another slide, but Sarah or Jenna will help me with that. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Very comprehensive report. Are there any questions from the members of council on this item? Councillor Lucky.
Through your worship, what is the rationale for using the 60th percentile versus what I guess what we used prior to, which is the 55?
Yeah, through your worship, that's a great question. It's really just no more than saying, hey, there's an alignment with your internal pay practice. Many councils in the province, again, it's the choice of council, but many councils will align their pay practice for elected officials to be reflective of the same percentile target that's been approved for the staff. So it doesn't mean that the 55th percentile would be wrong, it's just not aligned. So it's a pay policy or a pay practice that this council may wish to adopt. And again, it would be aligned with common practice in the sector.
Any other questions from the members of council? Seeing none, then, do I have a mover on the recommended motion as appended to the agenda that report number CAO-006-24 be received for information, and that the base pay rate for elected officials equivalent to the 60th percentile as outlined by ML Consulting be referred to the 2025 budget process? Moved by Deputy Mayor Snyder and seconded by Councillor Crockett. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. So what are we, I'm sorry. We have to finish the motion. We have a split vote. Yeah. I would like to see this reviewed just for purposes. But is there an opportunity before I'd like to ask this question. So before we move this on to the budget process, would there be any discussion between the 50th, 55th, and the 60th percentile? Can anyone answer that before we? Anyone have an objection to that?
My concern, through your worship, is that, if every council wants to put the rates into the 60th percentile, then it just artificially raises it up. I think that 55 or being within the 50 to 55 percentile is perfectly reasonable.
Thanks, Councillor Lockie. Any other comments or responses from council?
I would agree. I think it's too high a raise.
And on that basis, because that's what I'm also thinking of, then I would recommend that it be 55, referred to the 2025. So I would not support the recommendation to go to 60%.
Today, that defeats the current motion and you have to put a new motion forward.
Right. Would not be my job. Right? No. Is anyone willing to make the recommendation to the 50th percentile?
Mayor, if I can assist, perhaps, council can consider referring the whole matter to the 2025 budget process rather than selecting a percentage now. That helps.
Council in favor of that?
I would make that motion.
Okay. Councillor Heyman then will make the motion. Seconded. Councillor Lockie. Call the vote then. All right. So that will be what it is, and I will have the clerk amend the document. Okay. Then the next item on the agenda is remuneration for the volunteer fire services. And again, Mary Ann, I will have you do your presentation.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Your Worship. Okay, so I'll take the second slide, the next slide. Thank you. So this slide just sets out the background. And again, just as I said earlier, with the council remuneration, this follows on the heels of having done a review for the compensation review for staff. So we weren't quite ready at that time to present, so we just need a bit more time to pull some data together, and this is the reason for bringing it forward to council for consideration this evening. A market review for volunteer fire service has not been conducted for some time. I can't give you a year because we couldn't find the year. We just know it hadn't been done for a while. Just by way of backgrounds across the sector, there really is no uniform method of compensation in the municipal sector for volunteer fire service. There are some municipalities that pay hourly rates. Others pay point on points. Others use stipends and honorariums. And some use a combination of these various elements of pay. So that in itself makes it difficult to compare. So it's just an observation. The Thames Centre Volunteer Fire Service is paid on a point system with additional annual stipends or honorariums provided to the officers. So 1 point in our service is equal to $25. For emergencies, there are 2 points that are allocated for the first hour of attendance and 1 point for each additional hour or part thereof. So therefore $50 for the first hour and $25 for each additional hour or part thereof in a call, an emergency call. For non-emergencies in training, there's payment of 1 point per hour or part thereof, so that's $25 per hour or part. In terms of honorariums, district chief is provided $3,500 annually. The deputy district chief, $3,500. The captain training officer is $1,500. The acting captain fire investigator is $1,000, and the committee chair is $500. And that would be in addition to the emergency pay rates and the non-emergency and training pay rates. Market data was collected from fire services that use hourly base pay rates for all positions. 4 comparators were selected considering size and scope of service, geographic location, and the proximity to the 401 corridor. Those being King, Puslynch, Port Hope, and Hamilton Township. The idea being the proximity to the 401 corridor is impacting the emergency response for the service. And so thinking that these folks would probably be highly comparable. The reason why we are looking at comparing the hourly base pay rates is because in some of the municipal volunteer fire service where there's a proliferation of the honorariums, it's very difficult to compare the total compensation as it works through the respective services. So we tried to compare what we could. I'll take the next slide. So based on that, you can see in this slide, you can see what was comparable and easier to compare was the firefighter. So we know that in Thames Centre, our firefighter for the first hour of call-in is paid $50 an hour. So what we did was we compared through the comparator organizations, the 4 of them, what the equivalent first hour response would be. The 60th percentile target of that is $52. Our value is $50. The reason, again, why we're choosing the 60th percentile target is the 60th percentile pay target was selected for the employee compensation review. So you can see that we are low compared to the external pay market based on that target, considering there's a 2 times payment for the first hour of attendance. So it's recommended that the point value of $25 be increased to $26 to reflect the 60th percentile call-in rate. Therefore, and you can see times that by 2, you're at the $52, which you see on the screen. And that we're further recommending that a pay structure be introduced for officer positions based on a percentage of the first-class firefighter rate. This is a common compensation framework that's used in the Ontario Fire Service in terms of career firefighting, and it's also becoming prevalent in volunteer fire services as well. We'll see what that looks like on the next slide. So you can see in the dark green shade the value that's brought forward from the market assessment. So you see in the dark green around middle part of the chart, first-class firefighter and committee chair. So that would be basically the first-class firefighter at $26 an hour, or on an hour, and then for the first response being a 2 times payment would be $52. And you can see there's a gradation moving up to the various officer levels. So for acting captain or fire investigator, 105% of first-class firefighter, and you can see that's $27.30. And if you're then looking at, what would it be on first response with the 2 times, it's $54.60. And you can see that as you move on up the chart. So 110% of first-class firefighter for captain and training officer, 120% for first-class firefighter for the deputy, and 130% for district chief. And then as we're moving down below the first-class firefighter, there's a recognition that as we're onboarding our volunteer firefighters, they're coming in and learning the position. So we've got 70% of our first class for fourth class for firefighter, 80% of the first class for third, and 90% of our first class firefighter for the second class. So you can see again the math as it moves across to the far right column, just multiplying that by the multiple of 2 for the first hour of response. There are details regarding the recommended changes in a staff report, which I don't have in front of me. I've seen that report, and this probably should be a new package, and staff can take you through that. I was just really here this evening to kind of give you a sense of how the approach, or how the calculations were made. What is the practice that it's intending to reflect in terms of its prevalence across the sector. So in terms of pay practice and future considerations, it's recommended that council give consideration to implementing the 2024 salary grid effective Jan 1 of this year. It's recommended that methodology of compensation, points and stipends be further reviewed during the 25 budget process. It's also recommended the following pay practices be continued to build resilience in pay policy, and this is supported by prevailing practice in the sector. Again, we recommended this with the staff compensation review, and I think the review of volunteer fire service pay follows suit. We should be looking at that really over a 3 to 4 year cycle, and just make sure that we're up to date with regards to pay practices in the municipal sector as it relates to the volunteer service. It has become a best practice to make sure we're not overpaying or underpaying, making sure we're competitive, reflective of past practice, and being fair and reasonable. Also recommending that annual increases to the salary grids continue to be determined by conducting a review of our comparator organizations. We're doing this with the employee group. We can do it the same with fire. It keeps us attuned to how pay is being increased in the volunteer fire service, so we can take a look at that annually. Also, we didn't effectively evaluate these positions. Not all of them, but I have evaluated the position of firefighter. We just want to keep our eye on the value for the firefighter using the job evaluation. And that's sort of where we're at with regards to pay practice and future considerations as it relates to the service. So I'm happy to take any questions with regards to the approach and methodology, and you can see this as with the council record. The council report has also got a pathway through to budget.
Thank you, Marianne. Does council have any questions? Councillor Crockett.
Considering that we just had the report on the fire departments here in Thames Centre, I was just wondering whether this increase aligns with that record that was put forward.
Anyone able to answer that?
I believe the answer is yes. If regarding no, we have the fire master plan and the recommendations
Yes.
there, does that align with this as well? Thanks.
It does, thank you.
Any other questions? Deputy Mayor Smiger?
Just more of a comment. I want to thank Staff Marianne for the report. I think it has been some time since we reviewed the compensation, so I fully support it. With respect to the staff report, I know that under financial implications, I know that it's a difference of $1, but overall, what is the impact on the 2020 budget?
Thank you. So I'm going to refer to our Director of Finance. I think it's about 20,000-ish, give or take, in terms of increase from 23 approved budget to 2024. It's tough to state for sure because they're done based on points. How many points it may be globally year to year, but that's what we've put aside. I'm getting a nod. That's accurate. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay then, do I have a mover on the recommended motion as appended to the agenda that report number CAO-007-24 be received for information and that council approve a $1 rate increase for 2024 and that any further adjustments to remuneration for volunteer fire services be referred to the 2025 capital budget? Budget process. Deputy Mayor Smiger and seconded by Councillor Crockett. All in favor? Okay, none opposed, that motion carries then. The next item.
I'll sign off. Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thanks for allowing me to attend this evening. Have a good meeting.
Thanks so much, Marianne.
Bye-bye.
So the next item on the agenda is 10.6, application for part lot control exemption. Sifton Properties Limited as applicant. Rosewood subdivision is the project. Phase 2, Thorndale Block 72 on Plan 33M-832, and Ms. Cortez to present. Oh, it's already me a curve, are you? Okay. Dan, go ahead.
Through the chair, thanks, Mayor, members of council. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Dan Fitzgerald, Manager of Planning with Middlesex County. And I appreciate the opportunity to come here tonight and provide some planning recommendations for you on a few applications. So agenda item 10.6 is a request for a part lot control exemption from the planning act provisions with respect to a property within the Rosewood subdivision, and that being phase 2 of the subdivision agreement. So in this particular instance, the lands are located on the north side of Purple Beach Street and on the west side of Blue Spruce Avenue. And they do maintain a frontage of approximately 157 meters, as well as an area of approximately 1 acre. The lands are designated residential under the Thames Center official plan, and they are zoned a site-specific residential third density exception R3-10 zone. Council previously did provide an exemption to part lot control on October 16th, 2023, and the file was brought forward at that meeting. So as indicated by the developer, due to market conditions, they have not registered the lands into separate lots at this point in time. And they are requesting the bylaw be extended for an additional 3 years, so that being July 15th, 2027. This site is designed to develop into 3 townhouse blocks, each supporting 6 individual townhouse units for a total of 18 units. And their plan would be to sell units individually as street fronting towns. And again, as I previously mentioned, this is part of phase 2 of the Rosewood subdivision and is captured in the existing subdivision agreement. So I know that the application was previously subject to public planning meetings, and it does maintain an executed subdivision agreement to control orderly development. So given the above, I am of the opinion that the extension of the part lot control exemption is considered appropriate. Therefore, I am recommending that part lot control exemption be approved and that the implementing bylaw be brought forward for consideration by council. Thank you.
Okay, Dan. Let's see now, where are we? So, council, any questions? No. Pardon?
So how it works that.
Well, if there are no questions then from council, then I'm not seeing any hands raised. So we have a motion before us that application for part lot control exemption PLC -02-24 by Sifton Properties Limited for lands located on the north side of Purple Beach Street and on the west side of Blue Spruce Avenue in the village of Thorndale and legally described as block 72 on plan 33M 832 be approved and that the implementing bylaw as shown in the bylaw portion of the agenda be considered by council. The mover and the seconder. Moved by Councillor Lockie and seconded by Deputy Mayor Smiger. All in favor? Thank you. No opposed. Right. Item 10.7. Application for draft plan of condominium, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, D Charging Holdings owner, Zelenka Preamble Limited as the agent, west side of Eva Street and Ida Street in Dorchester. Just before we begin, I'd like to let everyone know that before the planner presents this report, I'd like to advise that the public participation meeting has already taken place for these planning applications and that the public has no opportunity to speak at tonight's meeting. Council will take into consideration all comments submitted in writing as well as submitted to the public meeting that was held on January the 29th of 2024 before rendering a decision. So I'm going to turn this over to Dan again to present.
Yeah, so through the chair, thanks Mayor and many members of council. This particular item being item 10.7 on the agenda tonight is an application as suggested for a draft plan of condominium consideration as well as an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment. With respect to this particular application, as you may recall, and as noted, this particular application is referred to as the Eva and Ida Street development proposal, as the lands are located west of the existing improved sections of both Eva and Ida Street, north of the river in Dorchester. So the purpose of this particular presentation is to provide council with an evaluation of the proposal and recommendation for your consideration this evening. So council's role tonight with respect to this application, I would consider as twofold. Noting that the County of Middlesex is the approval authority for applications of draft plan of condominium, as well as official plan amendments, and you are the delegated authority for zoning bylaw amendments. So from the first perspective, we would be seeking to provide a recommendation to the County of Middlesex for their consideration on the decision for the proposed application for draft plan of condominium, as well as the proposed official plan amendment. And then secondly, to either approve, refuse, or refer back to staff the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. And as you may recall, the application was subject to a public open house on December 7th, 2023, and it did come before council for public meeting on January 29th, 2024. Several comments were made and taken back for staff consideration as part of that particular process. And to refresh council, the original proposal did request draft plan approval for 63 units in a vacant land condominium, 61 of which were street townhouse units, and 2 units for stacked townhouse dwellings, which are represented as 44 dwelling units altogether. So the applicant, since those meetings, has revised the proposal to remove 1 unit abutting the rear yards of the lots municipally addressed 136, 140, and 144 Eva Street. The removal of the proposed unit is dual purpose. It is to provide a greater buffer for the rear yards of the existing single detached dwellings, while also providing an area to capture the existing stormwater flow from the adjacent parcels. The applicant has also consolidated the requested stacked townhomes into one unit on the proposed draft plan. The remainder of the draft plan essentially remains the same and includes the protection of the natural heritage area, the tree planting compensation area, private roads, parking, a stormwater management pond as part of the common elements of the condominium, as well as an extension of Eva and Ida Street to the proposed private entrances to a full urban cross-section. So the subject lands were originally subject to draft plan approval through application file number 39T 95005 when the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing was the approval authority. The application was eventually approved by the Ontario Municipal Board and permits development of 59 single detached dwellings on the site with an average of frontage of 9.75 meters. So the county has made efforts, particularly in 2007 with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, as well as the Ontario Municipal Board and municipality and the owner to obtain the original draft plan conditions, where unfortunately none were found. So despite references to them in several documents, no draft plan conditions as far as the county is aware do exist for the approved existing development on this particular parcel. There is a registered subdivision agreement. However, the status of that agreement is unknown and is dated, and it's unlikely to meet our development standards of today. So in terms of dwelling units, the revised proposal would include 60 street townhouse dwelling units and 44 dwelling units spread across 2 stacked back-to-house townhouse buildings. In terms of the land, the property is approximately 3.7 hectares or 9.1 acres in size, and it does maintain frontage again along Eva and Ida streets, which currently right now are unopened road allowances. The property is surrounded by vacant lands north and west, which I would note to council is subject to a current development proposal. It's surrounded by residential uses to the east in the format of single detached dwellings, as well as industrial uses to the south. Alongside the proposed draft plan of condominium, the applicant has also applied for an official plan amendment, as well as a zoning bylaw amendment. The official plan amendment does seek to change the designation of the lands from residential to a site-specific special policy area, residential special policy area, which is intended to permit medium-density residential development. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment seeks to rezone the lands from a site-specific residential first density holding zone, or R15, to 2 separate site-specific residential third density zones in order to accommodate street townhouse dwellings, which reduce the minimum lot area, reduce the front yard and exterior side yard depths, reduce the interior side yard, reduce rear yard depths, and increase lot coverage. The second site-specific third density zone as referenced would permit stacked townhouse dwellings and seeks site-specific provisions to reduce front yard setbacks and reduce interior side yard setbacks. The remainder of the lands would be rezoned to open space to respect the existing natural heritage areas. General, the provincial policy statement, county's official plan as well as Thames Centre's official plan does prioritize efficient growth and development patterns within the existing settlement boundaries of municipalities. This particular proposal is within the settlement boundary of Dorchester. All 3 documents also seek new development to occur in safe, sustainable, healthy manners and generally on full municipal services. All 3 documents also encourage a range of housing types, densities, and options to meet demands and future needs of residents. Additionally, the lands are subject to natural heritage feature. The applicant has scoped the development pocket in consultation with the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority. That is generally considered appropriate for development on this particular site. The applicant is also providing a compensation planting area to reestablish the removal of trees from the site that are subject to development. Staff have received several comments as part of the open house, the public meeting, as well as additional comments received following the drafting of the planning report attached to the agenda tonight. So comments that were received prior to the drafting of the report are summarized in the planning report. And comments that were received after drafting and posting of the report have been forwarded to council in advance of the meeting. And just as a note to the general public, we'll formulate part of the public record here tonight. These comments include, these include comments from the following individuals. And I do apologize to anyone if I see your name wrong. Greg Body, Darren Gilbert, Walt Taylor, Renee Crow, Jeanette Mass, Kelly and Kevin Martin, Mark, Alice, Dallas, and Denver Dirksen, Randy Thompson, Blair Anderson, Neil McDonald, Ethan Campbell, and Bree Mandaluzzi, Irene Pierce, Bob Scott, Kaylee Hitchen, Craig Walsh, and Andrea Plant. I would just note to council the comments received from these individuals did not support development on these lands. As council is aware, the north side of the river does face challenges to municipal servicing. However, the municipality is collecting existing development charges for the purpose of establishing the means to accommodate sanitary services through the future installation of a pump station, as well as a sanitary force main. Preliminary draft plan conditions are attached to the planning report, which recommends that the developer be required to front-end development charges to help pay for the cost of the proposed municipal infrastructure. But also note that development would not be able to occur on this particular site until such time as services were installed and functional. Further, comments have been made regarding the existing character and fit within the existing development context. So to this end, staff in consultation with the developer's consultant are recommending that the zoning bylaw amendment be referred back to staff in order to further scope potential site specific provisions to help ease concerns regarding impacts to existing development. This will be brought back to council at a future date for consideration if the recommendation is adopted. Staff have also received comments regarding both the requirements for a traffic impact study as well as an environmental impact study. So both of these particular studies are included as conditions of traffic approval. The benefit of the TIS will cover a broad perspective of traffic on the north side of the river as a result of development and is required as a draft plan condition to North Street. Additionally, comments have been asked regarding EIS or an environmental impact study and why generally it wasn't provided prior to draft plan approval. So I would say in my review of the records and in consultation with the UTRCA, staff are generally confident that the development limits established in the proposed draft plan is appropriate to provide necessary setbacks to the existing natural heritage areas. I would note though that a study will need to be provided as a condition of approval to the satisfaction of the municipality. And as such, any potential recommendation resulting from a peer-reviewed study would be required to be implemented and in which in extreme circumstances could require that the applicant bring forward a red line amendment to the development limits for units. So essentially, there was something that was identified on the site that was a specific concern for a national heritage perspective. We would require the developer come back and potentially amend the development limits for the proposed units. So given the information provided in the planning report, I am satisfied that the proposal is consistent with the provincial policy statement and does conform to the County of Middlesex official plan, as well as the municipality Thames Center's official plan. So therefore, I am recommending that the County of Middlesex be advised that the municipal council recommends draft plan approval. That official plan amendment number 31 redesignating the lands from residential to residential special policy area 1 to permit medium density development to be adopted and forwarded to the County of Middlesex for consideration of approval. And as noted, that the zoning bylaw amendment be referred back to staff to permit further discussion on the zoning provisions, and that staff be directed to prepare a recommendation, as well as an implementing bylaw for council's consideration at the next regular council meeting hearing planning applications. So thank you, and I'm certainly available to answer any questions the council may ask.
Thank you, David. At this point, then I'm going to turn this over to questions to council. Deputy Mayor Snyder.
Before I get into that, I understand curfew said.
Oh, I am sorry. I did.
That we extend curfew tonight.
Thank you for the reminder. Second. Councilor Crockett, all in favor? Thank you, that motion carries. All right, going back then, any questions regarding this particular application? Deputy Mayor Smiler.
Thank you. So I have a few questions, and I will start, with traffic, and I did, give the staff a bit of a heads up, because I guess, during consultations that I had with the public, and from what we're seeing as well, there are the traffic backups already, even without having that. So I had anticipated in talking to the previous planner that there would be a consolidated traffic impact study that would be done prior to any approvals and peer review, so that when these applications came forward, the layout would be such that it would address any of the traffic impact studies, the concerns or recommendations with the study. So I think for me, this is a little bit for the board. So I think we would like to see those studies, even the environmental impact study, done first, because that can primarily change, right, the way in which we're going to develop these things. So I don't know that you have a comment with respect to that. I know that you're indicating that you're including that as part of the condition, but again, I think if we're going to plan properly, I think it would be really beneficial if we have those documents and peer review first. So that was my question about traffic, and maybe I'll just make my comments, and if you want to provide some feedback and response, that's fine. So I do support the increased density, but I honestly think that he could and should control where that goes. So I think we need to respect the existing residential property owners, and I think we need to have a really significant interface between where those existing residential property owners are and the new development. And I just feel that this plan does not assist that. So I guess I'm hopeful that there can be some conversations with the applicant in terms of understanding the concerns of the residents and ways that we can mitigate that, and ways that we can make improvements to the plan so that we can have the multi-residential that we need in Thames Center, but we need to balance that with the people who are. So those are my two primary comments.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Smiler. Is there anyone else who would like to comment? Councilor Crockett.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to echo the comments made regarding the environmental study and the traffic impact study being shown before the proposal is considered. I do think that these will be impactful, especially in this area specifically. In addition to echoing the comments on the need for a diverse set of housing here in Thames Center, but not necessarily, to be blunt, in this location, or a way that we can balance what is needed as a community with what already exists. The proposal that was put forward on North Street, close proximity to this area, really met our needs as a community and fit in well with the existing residential area. Further to that, I am disappointed that there was such minor changes following the public consultation meeting and the meeting on January 29th. I think it was very clear that there were major concerns on not only the density, location, but also just the general concerns of water in that area. And my understanding is that these proposed housing units are going to address the high water table there, but it's not addressing the water issues that the current residents are already facing and will be impacted by with this build. In addition to that, I think we need to look at a fulsome plan to bring infrastructure to the north side of the river, especially as it regards to water, wastewater, sewers, etc. We know that it's going to be coming, but I think there needs to be a more comprehensive plan on how that's being done, as opposed to just, covering the cost of a pump house. We need to inform the residents that already live north of the river, that would be impacted by the implementation of these sewers and waterways, and what their role is to play in that, whether it's the disruption because of construction, whether it's the necessity of hooking up themselves. We've already seen an instance in that south of the river here, and we don't want that to replay again. And then I think lastly is just, I think that there's this proposal's kind of a bit of a guise under affordability. There's a lot of dollars that are going to go into building these developments north of the river that essentially will not make these proposed affordable houses affordable in the end. And whether if that's for resale value of our existing residents, whether that's you know, the additional costs associated with building north of the river. And then just in closing, unfortunately, I just don't think this currently conforms to our #1 strategic goal under smart planning on the, you know, growth, but encouraging the hometown feel that we already have here in Thames Center. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Crockett. I'm sorry, Councillor Larky.
Thank you, through your worship. I would also like to, you know, echo the concerns of the Deputy Mayor Smiver and Councillor Crockett, and just also call out that, you know, for medium density, it's supposed to meet 2 of the 4 criteria, but it does only meet 1 of the criteria. Also concerned that it just isn't compatible with the existing neighborhoods. It does contain a beautiful forest feature, but I don't see, you know, there's no environmental assessment. And just many other concerns, such as drainage, I don't believe have been properly addressed, and I don't think the changes reflect what has been, you know, brought to our attention by the public.
Thanks, Councillor Larky. Anyone else? Councillor Heyman?
Yes, thank you. I would echo all the concerns mentioned before by my fellow councillors. And this was actually an interesting opportunity to learn more about the PPS and the evolving state of our PPS. And I think where it recommends a range of housing units and affordable housing, it says to coordinate. And I think that the way that this is being put through, it creates a tremendous risk of just allowing anyone to get an official plan amendment if they say they're going to do high density. And I don't think that's how we want to plan. I think we want to actually plan and to be purposive. And if you look at that section of the PPS in the draft that's going forward, it recommends setting targets. And I think that actually allows us to use our official plan to set out areas where we can have these densities that we're balancing. We know mixed communities are better places for society and better places to live, but that mix has to be balanced. And I think I do appreciate the recommendation. I think you are trying to meet many of the challenging goals that we have at this time, but again, this is an interesting time in that there's a lot of money being made in development, but there's not actually a lot of houses being built. And I find that frustrating, but also knowing that this is likely going to go up to a higher level, and that's why I do think those requirements and PPS are so important at this juncture. And I did, you know, we heard examples about the amount of criteria within our official plan that need to be met that are not being met. It also specifically states in our official plan that a environmental impact assessment must accompany a planning application adjacent to environmentally significant lands. And there is a significant woodlot adjacent to this proposed development. So it says must, not may, not shall. And again, when you look at the PPS, it says it must be It must be proven, not that it can be proven. So I don't believe that this would pass the smell test even at the potential level, because, you know, the province delegated the responsibility to natural heritage to municipalities. It's no longer with the Conservation Authority. They are no longer the decision-making body when it comes to natural heritage. So it is our responsibility in this first kind of test to actually uphold that responsibility and not cave to the pressures of development. So that's why I think it is important that we hold by that, and we hold by our official plan, because it's going to be tested a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heeman. Anything else to add before we go on? No? Okay. We have, Councillor Heeman.
I would like to make the motion to deny.
All right, we have the motion to deny the motion here. A second here for that. Councillor Lockie.
Also, sorry, I think, did you have a comment?
Oh, I'm sorry, Dan.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not sure what it is.
Sorry, to the chair, just more so those questions or just comments, do you want me to respond to any in advance or provide council any additional correction?
Yes, if you'd like to respond.
First of all, I would say, comments that you provided here tonight, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with a lot of the things that jumped out to me when I first read this application. I did have the opportunity to speak on this particular application with their director for the county, and there's two, well, 3 or 4 aspects and common things that are kind of brought up. One is certainly like the requirement for the GIS, the traffic impact study. I totally appreciate that. When we look at development, we're looking at this particular case a more holistic picture for development on the north side of the river in general, right? So you have your North Street, which was previously. We have this site, and then we have an adjacent site. And really, when you look at development more holistically, you want to ensure that any type of studies that are to occur happen and address all of the development in general across the river. So in this particular instance, similar to North Street, there was a condition that was added yesterday. That a TIS has to be completed, and it has to be satisfactory to the municipality for North Street subdivision, this one, and then a future decision on an application. And in this particular instance, the only thing I would note is this particular site is not complete or is not intending to construct public roads. It's all private streets internally, and really the only extensions for consideration are existing road allowances that are there. Where we would want to have further consideration for a TIS would be, well, should Ida Street extend into another future subdivision to relieve traffic congestion within the existing low density residential neighborhoods? So I think that, from my mindset, when I first looked at these applications, was something that I would certainly want to see. From the larger subdivision perspective, do the TIS at that particular point in time, because then we know how the municipal road infrastructure is going to work for all of the development of all of these things, both now and into the future. So I think including it as a condition is potentially reasonable, similar to what you did at North Street. But I would flag that I think it's appropriate for the trigger of the next one to require that comprehensive study for all development to kick in and say, okay, how is this all going? In terms of the EIS, the reason why I brought up the original approval that's still maintained on site, the subdivision agreements that is there, is that primarily, this particular individual could go to final plan approval and start building on this particular site as soon as they could. In this particular instance, obviously, they're held up by the position that they don't have existing municipal services. But from an EIS perspective, there was no regard for that in the previous subdivision. So we're not really, from the county's perspective, we're not approaching this from the blank slate perspective. There is development that is approved here. We're more so trying to look at it from the mitigation perspective. Respecting the fact that, previous conversations have occurred with the UTRCA. This application, my understanding, has been around for quite a while, and then the pre-application stages, years. And those initial comments that came back from the UTRCA as part of that initial pre-consultation screening didn't indicate any potential concern with natural heritage at that particular point in time when they actually still maintained the ability to control natural heritage. And that's simply due to the fact that the site's not regulated. It is, however, considered a natural heritage feature in the Middlesex Natural Heritage System Study. So that's why, as part of, I agree with everyone that EIS will have to occur on this particular site. It's whether or not you do it pre or post. In most cases, for smaller developments, we would suggest that post development could be considered appropriate, just because the cost that's associated with those types of studies is quite substantial. So we want to look at it again from a more holistic perspective. But it's totally within council's purview, and from my perspective, I would support doing that in advance of consideration for draft plan approval. There was a note that was brought forward about affordability. I'm always weary when that term comes up, because there's market-based housing, there's affordable housing, and then there's more affordable options for housing. This is not market-based housing. This is not affordable housing. This is an option for a potential more affordable option for existing residents or potential future residents. So when we say affordability, it's not going term through CMHC, not through the Planning Act. It's not geared to income housing. It's just an alternative option, which, because of the nature of development on smaller lots, generally becomes more affordable than going into a new subdivision and purchasing a brand new single detached home. So when we say more affordable, because it's not affordable housing, but it's maybe a more affordable option at the end of the day. I think, I heard a lot of comments as well, and certainly from the public, going through a lot of emails and correspondence that we've received about potential transition for this development site to the existing single-family residential that's within the even Ida residential neighborhoods. That transition is always hard to manage, regardless of what you're doing. When you look at the easiest way to manage those transitions at the end of the day is potentially controlling density, controlling heights, and increasing setbacks. That's the typical way that planners would recommend how to manage existing development with new development. And keep in mind, we're trying to also walk the line with provincial directives for more affordable, not more affordable, sorry, I shouldn't say that, more housing in general. So when we look at transitions, we look at, well, how far is this unit set back from the existing residential development? We always seek to improve potential surrounding land use issues that may exist within existing subdivisions. So when I say that, I've also heard about issues with existing overland drainage patterns. Given that there's higher land that comes down, and there's land to the east that kind of drains into this property. So I always, my personal motto, I tell people, and I'm sure your public works is the same, is we don't create situations that are worse off at the end of the day. So what we would seek to do as part of that detailed engineering design through in this particular case condominium agreement would be to better the potential stormwater runoff in the particular area. So we already know that water comes from the north down into the site, and we know that water comes from the east that travels into the site. So part of the conceptual engineering design in this particular instance is to include catch basins within the potential future Ida Street road allowance, which would then convey the stormwater through a stormwater system through the site into a storm pond, hold it, treat it, and slowly release it off-site into the existing Eva Street's storm sewer. So that's the general intent in this particular case. It would also, or the proposal in theory would also continue to take water from the east, as it currently already does, but channelize that water into swale type system and then into a catch basin, which again would go into the stormwater system through their pond, and then it will slowly release into the stormwater sewers. So that engineering is built in, and that's something we certainly always have prepared for, and helps with these situations of trying to build new development within the existing context of development. So that's one mitigation strategy that we certainly have regard for. Another mitigation strategy, which was part of why I had recommended referring the zoning bylaw amendment back to staff, was to look at, well, is there potential to, reduce the height of these units as requested from 3 stories to 2 or 1, whatever it might be. Is there an opportunity to provide for an enhanced rear yard setback on that eastern portion of the development, which would then buffer these proposed townhouse dwelling units from those existing low density single detached dwelling units. Through that, we could also look at potential enhanced landscaping requirements along that area to provide screening, as well as fencing and those types of things. So that's something that we can certainly do in consultation with the applicant's consultant, to have further consideration from a zoning perspective. But it just kind of gives you an idea as to those are the types of potential mitigation strategies that we can use to lessen the impact of the existing neighborhood. But with that said, at the end of the day, what it really is going to come down to is the density appropriate for this particular property. So, and that's really what the vacant land condominium lot layout unit plan, as well as the official plan amendment, is essentially what you're considering here tonight. Is it appropriate to allow for medium density development on this particular property, even though it doesn't meet the 4 criteria that your official plan identifies? It meets 1, doesn't meet 3 other. So is medium density appropriate in some format, which is what the official plan amendment essentially is saying, and then is the density as proposed through that vacant land condominium plan, is that appropriate? So your basic council in this particular case is charged with saying, we don't agree with the density at all in this particular instance, and just refuse it and let it go through the standard process at that particular point in time. Or maybe it's an opportunity that those types of things can be addressed in zoning. So really, that's what I would charge you to have prepared for, is that density appropriate? Is the unit the multi-unit development medium density, is that appropriate for the site? If it's not, then that's how I would suggest. I know that's a lot of information for it, I'm gonna elicit more questions from this. But it just kind of breaks out further council for consideration, and it helps the public understand how the process works and what we take into consideration when reviewing these types of applications.
Thank you, Dan. That's a good explanation. Anyone else? I saw Tom's hand up first, and then we'll go to Councillor Cockett.
Yeah, I get the desire to be flexible, but we have to be consistent, and within this parcel, within this ecological feature, we made someone do an environmental impact assessment for a shed. Right, and Auburn has done the environmental impact assessment. We have multiple complaints about wetlands. Right, and there is no hydrogeological study being done, so we know that they're proposing slab on grade because there are hydrogeological issues. We do not know the extent And that's why I didn't think that the site is appropriate. Or that we have the information, and it's not on us to prove that it is suitable. It's for them to prove that it is, and they have not done so, and I think that it's very clear. In the requirements, and the requirements are not being met, but to clarify, my motion, I would, yeah, right, okay. There's a round.
Excuse me, before we move on to that, I think Councilor Crockett had another question or comment. Go ahead.
So, thank you, Dan. I think your response there provided a lot of information to be considered. And I think it's important before going into your motion to deny, is that this has become, a repetitive thing we've said at council, is that this is a legacy situation that we have now adopted and need to make a decision on. That this is slated for residential development, and if we deny flat out, assumably it will go to OLT. And could we lose conditions that we want? Or is there a way that we can defer to staff and work with the applicant on building out what works for Thames Center? That was a general comment.
Dan?
Yeah, so through the chair, so just a bit nomenclature, so you'd be referring back to staff, not defer would be to another meeting. But yeah, if you did want to refer back to staff, the only thing I would ask is that specific parameters be established as to what further discussions would be required with the applicant.
Yes, I don't like to discuss legal strategy with potential pursuant in attendance. But I think that that they have certain rights, and if they follow the process, then those rights would be acknowledged. And I think that the draft that they have and don't have mysteriously for single detached is a way to have continuity with the neighborhood in this instance. But even if, even if they want to have a draft plan of condominium or a detailed subdivision agreement, then they still need to have an environmental impact. And if at that time they want to pursue it further, then that's on their recognizance. But I think that we have a clear, it's very difficult for Ontario Land Tribunal to override natural heritage requirements. Maybe they don't care about it. That's up to them. But I'm not gonna circumvent those requirements on their behalf. And I think that it's an opportunity to deliver what is the best fit for the neighborhood. And that said, I still think we can meet the density targets. And we have approved a lot of medium density in the last in the last 5 years. It's not that we're without density, it's just not materializing. And so I think that the balance is ultimately for us to decide and for the province to decide.
Any other comments? I think, if I may, just one point, and that is that someone here earlier called us the municipality of no. I think it's important for the public to know that that is not our philosophy. Basically, what we are looking to achieve is not to stop development, because it is going to happen. We can't close the door and lock it, not allow anybody else into the municipality. However, what I think council is trying to get across to the applicant is something of a balance, something that and I totally understand from the business case side of it. But there's also the impact on the neighborhood and the fact that they're gonna be here for a while, as are those other houses. And in addition, there will be others surrounding this property. So I think it's important to say that we are not just out of hand cutting this off at the knees. We, if I understand council right, and if I'm wrong, please say so. But I think that is where we're at right now, is trying to achieve some sort of balance between growth and our existing residents. So Councillor Hemans, your motion. We can ask the clerk to read it out.
So that the County of Middlesex be advised, the Council for the Municipality of Thames Centre recommends refusal of the issuance of draft plan approval to the County of Middlesex for the application of draft plan of condominium file number 39TTCCDM 2302, requested by Zelenko Bramo on behalf of D. Charbon Holdings for the land legally described as lot 16 to 21, part of lot 22, South Ida Street, lot 16 to 18, part lots 19 to 22 North Eva Street, part of Sexton Street, Block C, Plan 274, parts 1 to 3 on reference plan 33R 10584 in the municipality of Thames Centre, and that the official plan amendment file 03-23 to redesignate certain lands be refused and the refusal be forwarded to the County of Middlesex for consideration, and that the application for zoning bylaw Z31-23 be referred back to staff to permit further discussion with the owner and agent on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Do we need to clear that? Refused? Okay. So that the zoning bylaw be refused.
Tom, is that the intent of your motion?
I believe so.
Okay, so we have the motion on the floor. Is anyone willing to second the motion? Councillor Lockie, all in favor? And none opposed? The motion carries. Thanks very much, planning, for working with us on this. I know it's a lot of work, particularly when you're stepping in. So I do appreciate that. We will move on to item number 11, reports of committees. Items listed under reports of committees are approved by council in one motion. Council members may request that one or more items be separated for further action. A mover and a seconder that reports of committee agenda 11.1 and 11.2 be approved as presented. Deputy Mayor Smiver and Councillor Milwaukee, all in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you. I have a very brief mayor's report. Since my last report, I've been pleased to attend following events. During the latter part of the month of June, I had the pleasure of welcoming to Thorndale many members involved in the emergency management. It was the first ever meeting of the Spring St. Clair Emergency Management to be held in the northern part of the territory, and Thames Centre was very pleased to host the event. It was very well attended and from all reports had lots of good information shared. It was also my honor to have a tour of the new London, the new Children's Museum at 1 Kellogg Lane, and present a check from the municipality to Kate Ledgley, the executive director. And I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a wonderful interactive place, not only for our residents from the area, but to a much broader community to come and experience this exceptional facility. On June 13, I was on hand to present awards to some very deserving students completing their high school graduation at LDSS. Faith Snyders, Matthew Lindsay, and Sam Wilsey all received the TC Awards this year. On June 20th, I had the opportunity to be with members of our Thames Center staff to listen to the presentation by the UTRCA for their land strategy plan for municipal staff and elected officials, which also provided an opportunity to ask questions on this ongoing strategic endeavor. Yesterday, I had the honor to welcome a small group of attendees to our local pride event in the municipality. The downpour certainly didn't dampen the afternoon in the park, even though there were small attendance. That's it. Thank you. Any other unfinished business? No. Notices of motion? New business. Okay, we will move on to bylaws. And the bylaws 53-2024 through 55-2024 be adopted as presented, and that bylaw 558-2024 being a bylaw to amend the comprehensive zoning bylaw 75-2006 for lands located at 2010 Fairview Road be introduced and adopted as presented. In bylaw, I'm sorry.
And bylaw 57-2024 be introduced, or be adopted, sorry.
Okay. A mover and seconder. Deputy Mayor Smyger and Councilor Heeman, all in favor? Okay, that's carried, Jenny. All right, moving on now to the next meeting schedule is Monday. This is up to council. The next one is originally scheduled on the calendar for Monday, August the 12th, 2024 at 5 p.m. I understand there isn't a lot coming forward, so I'm wondering about council's thoughts about eliminating that meeting and canceling it, and then moving on to September 9th meeting at 5 p.m. Any thoughts from council?
I would like to make the motion to delete the meeting scheduled for Monday, August 12th, 2024 at 5 p.m.
A motion's actually not needed, it is the mayor's call, she's just asking.
I recommend deleted.
So unless anyone has any particular objections to canceling the meeting of August the 12th. No objections? Okay then. So then that means that the next regularly scheduled meeting of the council will be Monday, September 9th, 2024 at 5 p.m. here in the council chambers. And that means now that I'm looking for an adjournment at 8:38 p.m. Councilor Heeman and Councilor Crockett, all in favor? Thank you, the motion carries, and thank you to staff and to all the people that are coming.